My parents refused to care for my toddlers, while I sat beside my oldest son as he battled leukemia. When I called my ex-husband for help, he told me I was just a poor writer and needed to deal with it. A month later, my brave boy passed away. I almost let the grief swallow me whole, but I chose to survive for my two remaining children. I kept my head down, built my life in absolute silence, and never asked my family for a single dime. 2 years later, my parents showed up at my front door with a piece of paper that would finally give me the justice I deserved. Before I tell you how I tore their perfect world apart, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe karma always collects its debts. It was a Tuesday evening when the aggressive pounding started on my front door. I was wiping down the kitchen counters in my rented 3-bedroom townhome. The place was modest, situated in a quiet Atlanta suburb, perfectly ordinary by every measure. That was exactly how I wanted it. I opened the door to find my parents standing on the porch. Vernon and Clarice did not believe in casual visits. My mother wore her tailored knit suit, the kind she usually reserved for Sunday service at their mega church. My father stood behind her, his jaw tight, his posture rigid with the kind of arrogant authority he carried as a church elder. They did not say hello. Clarice pushed past me, her heavy floral perfume filling my narrow hallway. She marched straight into my kitchen and slapped a crumpled, heavily creased document down on the granite island. The word foreclosure was printed across the top in bold black ink. "We need $150,000, Keisha," my mother said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, as if the neighbors could hear her through the brick walls. "The bank is taking the house on Thursday." I stood there staring at the piece of paper. This was the sprawling 6-bedroom estate they had bought to prove they belonged among Atlanta's black elite. My father stepped into the kitchen, crowding my space. "You need to take out a second mortgage on this townhome," he demanded, not asking but ordering. "Go to the bank tomorrow morning. We are not losing the family legacy because of a temporary cash flow problem." I looked at them. The absolute audacity of those two words. Family legacy. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I crossed my arms, feeling the phantom weight of a grief so heavy it still threatened to crush my chest. Family. I repeated the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. That is a fascinating choice of words, because this concept of family did not seem to exist 2 years ago. My mother rolled her eyes, an immediate defensive reflex. "Keisha, do not start this right now. We are talking about our home. I am talking about my son." I fired back, my voice dangerously calm. "I am talking about Jamal. I am talking about the night he was dying in a sterile hospital bed, hooked up to machines that could not save him. I called you begging you to watch Malik and Surry just for one night so I could hold his hand. Do you remember what you told me?" Clarice looked away, adjusting her pearl necklace. "It was the night of the annual church gala," I continued, refusing to let her look away. "You told me you could not possibly cancel your dinner with the pastor because it would look bad. You left me alone in a waiting room with 2 terrified toddlers while my 10-year-old son took his last breath. And now you stand in my kitchen and demand I go into debt to save your brick house." My father's face darkened with anger. "We gave you life, Keisha. We raised you. You owe us respect. We made a mistake that night, but we are your parents. You cannot just hold on to the past forever to punish us." As he finished his sentence, my phone, sitting right next to their foreclosure notice on the island, buzzed violently. The screen lit up with a text message from Trevon, my ex-husband. The man who had walked out on me when Jamal got sick because he claimed he could not handle the stress of a dying child. He had left me drowning in medical debt while he paraded around the city with a younger woman. The preview of his text was clearly visible. "Saw you driving a new SUV near the kids' school today. Child support modification incoming. You are not hiding money from me, Keisha." Clarice scoffed, seeing the message. "You see what happens when you refuse to honor your parents. The universe allows chaos into your life. You are a struggling freelance writer, dealing with a deadbeat ex. You need our guidance and we need this money. Sign the papers for the loan tomorrow, Keisha." I did not scream. I did not throw them out immediately. I simply reached into my purse on the stool next to me. I bypassed the standard debit cards and my modest cash. My fingers brushed against the heavy, cool metal of my solid titanium black card. I let it tap gently against the side of my purse, a quiet click that only I understood. I did not pull it out. I just looked at the two people who had abandoned me in my darkest hour, then down at the text from the man who had broken my family. I do not have $150,000 to give you, I said, my voice eerily smooth. I watched my mother's face twist with disgust, completely unaware that I actually had $15 million sitting in an offshore account, and that I was the anonymous buyer who had already purchased the debt to their precious estate. But before Vernon could launch into another tirade about respect and obligation, my phone rang. It was the front office at Malik and Zuri's elementary school. Trevon was currently standing at the reception desk, loudly demanding an unauthorized emergency pickup of my children, claiming he was there to assert his fatherly rights. I grabbed my keys, leaving my parents standing in the middle of my kitchen. The time for talking was over. Vernon takes a step closer, his expensive leather shoes squeaking against the kitchen floor. He crosses his arms, looking down at me with the same condescending glare he used to break my spirit when I was a teenager. He tells me I am being incredibly selfish, that I am letting my bitterness over the past blind me to the reality of the present. Then he drops the ultimate threat, his voice shifting into a low, calculated register designed to instill pure panic. He says he spoke with Trevon just yesterday afternoon. He tells me Trevon is actively building a case for full custody of Malik and Zuri, and is currently looking for character witnesses to support his petition. My father leans in his face, inches from mine, and says it would be a terrible tragedy if he and my mother were subpoenaed by Trevon's legal team. He says they would absolutely hate to stand before a family court judge and testify under oath that I am an unstable, grieving freelancer who cannot provide a suitable, healthy environment for my own children. He actually says the words out loud. He threatens to paint me as a reckless, emotionally damaged mother to a judge if I do not hand over the cash to save his status symbol of a house. The sheer breathtaking evil of his proposition settles over the room like a physical weight. My own parents are willing to sell my surviving children to my financially abusive ex-husband just to save their brick colonial mansion. They would actively aid the man who abandoned his dying son to go to a wine tasting, all to maintain their pristine image in their megachurch and their elite social circles. I do not scream. I do not cry. The woman who would have wept at this profound betrayal died in a hospital waiting room 2 years ago. I simply look at them, absorbing the absolute moral bankruptcy standing right here in my kitchen. Clarice watches me eagerly, her eyes darting from my face to my purse sitting on the counter. She clearly expects me to break down, pull out a checkbook, or agree to visit the bank immediately to take out a predatory loan. Instead, I reach inside my bag. My fingers intentionally bypass the standard debit cards, the crumpled grocery receipts, and the loose change. I grasp the heavy, cool edge of my solid metal Centurion black card. I pull it out slowly. I hold it between my index and middle finger, letting the sleek black titanium catch the overhead light, and I drop it flat onto the granite island. It lands with a heavy, undeniable metallic clink that echoes in the quiet kitchen. Clarice gasps loudly, her eyes bulging as she stares at the table. She is hopelessly status obsessed. She knows exactly what a Centurion card is and what it represents. She knows you do not get one by being a struggling writer living paycheck to paycheck. You only get an invitation for that card when your net worth requires a dedicated team of wealth managers to maintain. I watch the gears turning in her head, her mind frantically trying to reconcile the daughter she views as a miserable failure with the piece of limitless financial power resting casually on the counter. Vernon stares at the card, his threatening posture instantly faltering. He reaches out a trembling hand, his undeniable greed completely overriding his pride. Before his manicured fingers can even brush the metal, I snatch the card away. I slide it smoothly back into my designer wallet and snap the clasp shut with a sharp sound. I meet my father's shocked, hungry gaze, keeping my expression entirely blank and my voice perfectly level. I do not have $150,000 to give you. I do not tell them the full truth. I do not explain that I actually have over $15 million sitting safely in a diversified portfolio of offshore and domestic accounts. I do not reveal that the agonizing grief of losing my beautiful boy drove me to write a devastating thriller under a highly guarded pen Name a book that spent 50 weeks on the bestseller list and secured a massive streaming deal. I keep my power entirely concealed. And I absolutely do not tell them that when their bank quietly auctioned off their mortgage debt last week, my anonymous holding company was the winning bidder. I do not just have money. I literally own the very house they are currently begging me to save. Vernon's face turns a dangerous shade of dark red. The vein in his neck pulses rapidly as his overwhelming rage and sheer confusion collide. He opens his mouth to shout, to demand answers about the black card, to scream more empty threats about family court and my children. Before a single word can escape his lips, my cell phone rings. The sharp, persistent tone cuts through the heavy, suffocating tension in the kitchen. It is not another arrogant text message from Trevon. The caller ID clearly displays the main office number for Malik and Zuri's elementary school. I pick up the phone and answer, keeping my eyes locked dead on my parents. The school receptionist is on the other end. Her voice panicked and rushed. She tells me Trevon is currently standing at the front desk, raising his voice and causing a massive scene. He is demanding an unauthorized emergency pickup of my children, aggressively asserting his rights as their father to take them right now. I hang up the phone and slide it into my pocket. I look at Vernon and Clarice, who are still standing there waiting for their money, waiting for my submission. I grab my car keys. The time for entertaining their delusions in my kitchen is officially over. I abandon my decoy sedan, half parked in the fire lane, and sprint through the heavy glass doors of the elementary school. My heart hammers against my ribs, driven by a primal, fierce maternal instinct that blocks out everything else. I burst into the main administrative office and instantly spot him. Trevon is leaning casually against the laminate counter, flashing his signature bright practice smile at the elderly receptionist. He wears a sharp, aggressively tailored navy suit, playing the role of the devoted, highly successful father to absolute perfection. He is speaking in low melodic tones, attempting to charm the flustered woman into bypassing protocol and releasing my children to him. I do not hesitate. I march directly across the room and insert my body physically between him and the front desk. I slam my hand flat against the counter. I inform the receptionist in a voice that leaves zero room for debate or negotiation that this man is permanently removed from the authorized pickup list and has zero legal right to remove my children from the premises. Trevon's charming smile instantly tightens into a rigid, dangerous line. He tries to play the victim for the office staff. He sighs loudly, shaking his head and raising his hands in a gesture of fake surrender. He tells the receptionist that I am just an unreasonable, bitter ex-wife, making things difficult for a loving father. I ignore his pathetic, calculated performance entirely. I sign the early dismissal ledger with a steady hand and stand like a stone wall until the double doors swing open. Malik and Zuri run down the hallway, their backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. I grab their hands securely, shield them from his view, and guide them out of the building. Trevon follows us directly into the sunlit parking lot. His public-friendly mask shatters into pieces the exact moment the heavy school doors close behind us, revealing the vicious petty man hiding underneath. He speeds up, stepping aggressively in front of me and blocking my path to the vehicles. He crosses his arms over his chest and looks me up and down with a sneer of pure, unfiltered disgust. He laughs, a dry, mocking sound, gesturing dismissively at my outfit. He tells me it is utterly pathetic that I show up to our children's school looking like a homeless vagrant. He loudly ridicules my matching gray loungewear, calling them cheap, embarrassing sweatpants. He leans in close, his voice dripping with venom and condescension, and tells me I look exactly like what I am. A broke, delusional writer who is still sitting at a kitchen table pretending to have a real career. He points a sharp finger directly at my chest. He proudly declares that his new younger wife actually makes a six-figure corporate salary and can provide a stable, luxurious, normal home for Malik and Zuri. He boasts about his incoming court filing, eager to rub my face in my perceived powerlessness. He threatens that by this Friday, a family court judge will gladly hand him full custody of my surviving children. He smiles cruelly, stating that I am financially ruined, completely unstable, and cannot even afford to hire a real lawyer to fight him. He tells me to prepare to lose the only things I have left. I stand perfectly still and look at his smug, arrogant face, then glance down at my clothes. He looks at me and sees cheap cotton fleece. He severely lacks the financial literacy and refined palate to recognize custom spun, Loro Piana, cashmere and outfit that costs significantly more than his entire leased wardrobe. He sees a helpless, grieving mother clinging to a dying dream and drowning in medical debt. I do not correct his spectacular ignorance. I do not tell him about the ruthless powerhouse legal team I have on permanent premium retainer. I do not mention that my daily interest accumulation easily exceeds his combined annual household income. I remain completely silent. I let him build his entire legal strategy on the absolute fragile illusion of my poverty. He mistakes my silence for submission. He steps closer, trying to physically intimidate me, demanding to know how a poor little freelancer plans to stop a man of his stature. I do not flinch. I raise my right hand and simply snap my fingers. The sharp sound cuts through the warm parking lot air. Less than 2 seconds later, the aggressive, heavy screech of tires interrupts his arrogant rant. A massive matte black heavily customized SUV glides rapidly around the corner and brakes sharply right beside us. My private security specialist steps out of the driver's seat, immaculately dressed in a tailored dark suit with a visible earpiece. He moves with swift military precision, opening the reinforced bulletproof rear door for my children. I usher Malik and Zuri inside the plush soundproof leather interior. Trevin stands completely frozen on the asphalt. His jaw is completely slack. His eyes are wide and panicked as his brain forcefully short-circuits, desperately trying to process the sheer terrifying display of untouchable wealth and power parked right in front of him. I step gracefully up into the massive vehicle and wait for the heavy armored door to thud shut. I press a silver button on the armrest, lowering the thick tinted window just a single inch. I look at his stunned, pale face staring back at me. I tell him I eagerly await his court filing on Friday. The window glides up silently, sealing him outside, and my driver pulls us smoothly out of the parking lot, leaving my ex-husband choking on our dust. I stare at the glowing screen of my phone, the word traumatized burning itself into my retinas. Trayvon has the absolute nerve to claim he was the one traumatized by our son fading away. The sheer audacity of his legal filing sucks the oxygen straight out of my living room. The walls around me blur and dissolve. I am no longer standing in my safe, quiet townhome. I am ripped violently back to the worst night of my life. The harsh, sterile scent of bleach and rubbing alcohol floods my senses. I am standing in the blindingly bright hallway of the pediatric oncology ward. 2 years ago. It is late in the evening. The rhythmic, reassuring beep of Jamal's heart monitor suddenly spikes into a frantic, chaotic warning. Nurses sprint past me, their rubber shoes squeaking against the linoleum. A doctor shouts a medical code I have never heard before but instantly know means sheer terror. They push me out of his room. The door swings shut, leaving me completely helpless in the corridor with Malik and Zuri clinging to my legs crying because they do not understand why their mother is shaking. I pull out my phone with trembling hands and dial Trayvon. He is still my husband at this point, still the man who promised to protect our family. He answers on the fourth ring. I hear the unmistakable clinking of crystal wine glasses in the background, accompanied by the smooth, upbeat tempo of a live jazz band. He is at an exclusive wine tasting downtown with the young woman he has been seeing behind my back. I beg him to come to the hospital. I tell him Jamal is crashing and the doctors are rushing a crash cart into his room. Trevin sighs heavily into the receiver. The sound of his irritation cuts through my panic like a physical blade. He tells me I am being hysterical and ruining his evening. He says the doctors will handle it, and there is no reason for him to leave his important networking event. Then he delivers the line that permanently killed any lingering affection I ever had for him. You are just a poor writer, Keisha. You have the free time to sit in a hospital. Deal with it. The line goes completely dead. I stare at the disconnected screen, the jazz music replaced by the terrifying sounds of medical staff fighting for my son's life behind a closed door. Malik starts wailing, terrified by the chaos, and Zuri buries her face in my knees. I cannot be a comforting mother to toddlers and properly advocate for my dying 10-year-old at the exact same moment. I frantically dial my parents. Vernon and Clarice are just 20 minutes away. Surely they will drop everything for their grandson. My mother answers. She does not ask how Jamal is doing. She immediately complains about the loud background noise on my end. I sob into the phone pleading with her to drive over and pick up Malik and Zuri just for the night. I explain that Jamal's heart is failing, and I need to be in the room with him, but the hospital rules require the toddlers to stay out in the waiting area. Clarice lets out a sharp, deeply annoyed breath. She tells me that Jasmine and Preston have Preston's incredibly wealthy parents visiting from out of town. She explains with absolute serious conviction that she and my father are hosting an important introductory dinner at the country club. She says they cannot possibly cancel their reservations just because I cannot manage my own schedule and keep my children under control. She tells me to stop being dramatic and hangs up the phone to return to her social climbing. I am completely abandoned. I sit on the hard plastic chairs of the waiting area, rocking a screaming Malik and a shivering Zuri, desperately trying to pacify them with nursery rhymes while my eyes stay fixed on the door to Jamal's room. I am alone when the frantic alarms down the hallway suddenly change pitch. The chaotic beeping stops. It is replaced by a single continuous piercing tone, the flat line. A few minutes later, the doctor walks slowly out of the room. He does not have to say a single word. I see the hollow, defeated look in his eyes. My brave, beautiful 10-year-old boy is gone. And I was not even holding his hand because my family decided a dinner party and a wine tasting were more important than his final moments on earth. That continuous high-pitched tone of the flat line rings in my ears. It echoes through my skull, growing louder and louder, pulling me forcefully out of the memory. I blink, gasping for air, the sterile hospital walls vanishing as my living room comes back into focus. The sound does not stop. It takes me a full 10 seconds to realize the noise is not a ghost from my past. It is the aggressive, relentless ringing of my front doorbell in the present day. The drive to Malik and Zuri's elementary school was a blur of calculated precision. I did not speed recklessly, but I maneuvered my ordinary rented sedan through the Atlanta traffic with cold, unwavering focus. 2 years ago, a call like this would have sent me into a blind panic. I would have been crying behind the wheel, terrified of Trevon's aggressive manipulation and terrified of losing my surviving children. But the woman who used to cower under Trevon's demands died in that hospital waiting room. In her place was someone entirely different, someone with $15 million of armor and an impenetrable wall of titanium resolve. I pulled into the school parking lot, abandoning my decoy car in the fire lane. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the main office, my eyes immediately locking onto my target. Trevon was leaning casually against the laminate reception desk. He was wearing a sharply tailored navy blue suit, his posture practically radiating arrogant entitlement. He was flashing his signature practice smile at the flustered receptionist, speaking in that low, melodic voice he always used when he wanted to charm his way past the rules. He looked like the picture-perfect devoted father, a role he only ever played when he had an audience to applaud him. I did not pause to catch my breath. I marched directly across the room, my footsteps loud against the tiled floor, and physically inserted myself between him and the front desk. I slammed my hand flat onto the counter, immediately drawing the receptionist's startled gaze. I informed her in a voice that left absolutely zero room for negotiation or debate that this man was permanently removed from the authorized pickup list and possessed zero legal right to remove my children from the premises. Trevon's charming smile instantly tightened into a rigid, dangerous line. His jaw clenched, the familiar sign of his simmering rage. He tried to play the victim for the office staff, sighing loudly and raising his hands in a gesture of exaggerated fake surrender. He told the receptionist that I was simply an unreasonable, bitter ex-wife, making things unnecessarily difficult for a loving father who just wanted to see his kids. I ignored his pathetic, calculated performance entirely. I signed the early dismissal ledger with a steady hand and stood like a stone wall until the inner double doors swung open. Malik and Zuri ran down the hallway, their heavy backpacks bouncing against their small shoulders. My heart softened for a fraction of a second at the sight of them. I grabbed their hands, securely shielding their small bodies from his view, and guided them swiftly out of the building. Trevon followed us directly into the sunlit parking lot. His public-friendly mask shattered into pieces, the exact moment the heavy school doors closed behind us, revealing the vicious petty man hiding underneath. He sped up his long strides, easily closing the distance, and stepped aggressively in front of me, blocking my path to the vehicles. He crossed his arms over his chest and looked me up and down with a sneer of pure, unfiltered disgust. He let out a dry, mocking laugh, gesturing dismissively at my outfit. He told me it was utterly pathetic that I would show up to our children's school looking like a homeless vagrant. He loudly ridiculed my matching gray loungewear, calling them cheap, embarrassing sweatpants that proved how far I had fallen. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper dripping with venom and condescension. He told me I looked exactly like what I was, a broke, delusional writer who was still sitting at a kitchen table pretending to have a real career while the real world moved on without her. He pointed a sharp, manicured finger directly at my chest. He proudly declared that his new younger wife actually made a six-figure corporate salary and could provide a stable, luxurious, normal home for Malik and Surry. He boasted about his incoming court filing, eager to rub my face in my perceived powerlessness. He threatened that by this Friday a family court judge would gladly hand him full custody of my surviving children. He smiled cruelly, his eyes alight with malice, stating that I was financially ruined, completely unstable, and could not even afford to hire a real lawyer to fight him. He told me to prepare to lose the only things I had left. I stood perfectly still and looked at his smug, arrogant face, then glanced down at my clothes. He looked at me and saw cheap cotton fleece. He severely lacked the financial literacy and refined palate to recognize custom-spun, Loro Piana cashmere, an outfit that cost significantly more than his entire leased wardrobe. He saw a helpless, grieving mother clinging to a dying dream and drowning in medical debt. I did not correct his spectacular ignorance. I did not tell him about the ruthless powerhouse legal team I currently had on permanent premium retainer. I did not mention that my daily interest accumulation easily exceeded his combined annual household income. I remained completely silent. I decided to let him build his entire legal strategy on the absolute fragile illusion of my poverty. He mistook my silence for submission. He stepped even closer, trying to physically intimidate me, puffing out his chest and demanding to know how a poor little freelancer planned to stop a man of his stature and resources. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply raised my right hand and snapped my fingers. The sharp sound cut through the warm parking lot air. Less than 2 seconds later, the aggressive, heavy screech of tires interrupted his arrogant rant. A massive, matte black, heavily customized SUV glided rapidly around the corner and braked sharply right beside us. My private security specialist stepped out of the driver's seat, immaculately dressed in a tailored dark suit with a visible communication earpiece. He moved with swift military precision, opening the reinforced bulletproof rear door for my children. I ushered Malik and Surry inside the plush, soundproof leather interior, making sure they were safely buckled. Trevin stood completely frozen on the asphalt. His jaw hung completely slack. His eyes were wide and panicked as his brain forcefully short-circuited, desperately trying to process the sheer, terrifying display of untouchable wealth and power parked right in front of him. He looked from the imposing security guard to the customized vehicle and finally back to me, his entire reality crumbling in real time. I stepped gracefully up into the massive vehicle and waited for the heavy armored door to thud shut. I pressed a silver button on the armrest, lowering the thick tinted window just a single inch. I looked at his stunned, pale face staring back at me. I told him I eagerly awaited his court filing on Friday. The window glided up silently, sealing him outside, and my driver pulled us smoothly out of the parking lot, leaving my ex-husband choking on our dust. I walked toward the door, my chest still heaving as my lungs fight off the phantom, suffocating air of that hospital ward. I grip the cold brass handle and pull the heavy door open. It is not a confused delivery driver or a lost neighbor. It is my younger sister, Jasmine. She does not say hello. She does not ask if I am all right or why I look out of breath. She simply pushes her way past me, her sharp elbows knocking directly into my shoulder as she forces her way into my narrow entryway. She immediately looks down at her feet with a dramatic, exaggerated scowl. She complains loudly that the damp leaves on my modest concrete porch are completely ruining the suede on her $1,000 designer heels. I close the door and watch her march into my living room, her eyes darting around in harsh open judgment of my rented space. She drops her oversized luxury leather tote onto my coffee table, carelessly knocking over a neat stack of mail. This is the exact woman who claimed she was too busy hosting a country club dinner to care for my toddlers, while my eldest son took his final breath. Today she stands in my living room acting as though she is royalty gracing a peasant with her presence. She spins around her perfectly styled hair, catching the light from the window. She gets straight to the point, entirely skipping any pretense of familial warmth. She tells me that our mother just called her in an absolute hysterical panic. Jasmine crosses her arms, looking me up and down with the exact same expression of unfiltered disgust Trevon used in the school parking lot. She says Mom claimed I pulled out some kind of ultra-exclusive high-tier credit card during our kitchen argument earlier. Jasmine lets out a short, condescending laugh. She tells me that if I have secretly been hoarding money from a lucky freelance contract or some random investment, it is time for me to stop being incredibly selfish. She steps closer, invading my personal space, and demands that I co-sign a $500,000 business loan for her husband, Preston. I stand completely still, letting the sheer breathtaking audacity of her demand wash over the room. I ask her to repeat herself purely to hear the delusion spoken out loud a second time. Jasmine rolls her eyes, highly annoyed that she has to explain high-level finance to her supposedly broke, uneducated sister. She talks fast, rattling off Silicon Valley buzzwords she clearly memorized directly from Preston. She tells me Preston is a visionary tech founder and that his software startup is right on the verge of going public. She claims they are merely weeks away from an initial public offering that will instantly make them billionaires. But she adds with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand, they just need a temporary bridge loan to cover some unexpected minor operational costs until the IPO officially clears the regulatory boards. She paces across my rug, her heels clicking aggressively against the floorboards. She tells me that Preston's parents have all their massive assets temporarily tied up in European real estate right now, so they cannot provide the liquid cash. She points a sharp finger at my chest. She tells me this is my one chance to finally contribute something meaningful to the family legacy instead of just draining their emotional resources. She actually looks me in the eye and tells me not to be selfish. She tells me to be useful for once in my miserable life. She demands I call whatever bank issued that black card and authorize the $500,000 transfer by the end of the business day. While she is mid-rant, loudly lecturing me about how Preston is a recognized tech prodigy and how I owe them for all the times they allegedly tolerated my depressing attitude, my phone chimes. It is a specific, highly secure notification tone. I pull the device from my pocket. Jasmine scoffs loudly, visibly offended that I am looking at a screen instead of bowing immediately to her financial demands. I ignore her entirely. The message is from Marcus, my lead wealth manager at the elite private banking firm that handles my diversified offshore accounts. It is a heavily encrypted file marked urgent. I use my biometric scan to unlock the document. I keep my eyes focused completely on the glowing screen as Jasmine continues to pace around my living room, complaining about how small my windows are and how I desperately need to upgrade my lifestyle to match her elite standards. I open the executive summary Marcus just prepared for me. The document is a deep dive financial forensic audit into Preston's technology startup. I had Marcus run a quiet, comprehensive background check on my brother-in-law's company 3 weeks ago when I was reviewing my investment portfolio's broader tech holdings. The numbers staring back at me are completely damning. Preston's company is not going public. They are not weeks away from a lucrative IPO. They are drowning in catastrophic, insurmountable debt. But the bankruptcy is not even the most interesting part of the file. The forensic audit clearly details a highly sophisticated network of shell companies and fake vendor invoices. Preston is actively embezzling millions of dollars from his own startup. He is desperately trying to cover his tracks by securing a fast, unsecured $500,000 bridge loan to balance the ledgers before his quarterly board meeting this Friday. He is not a visionary genius. He is a desperate, cornered criminal trying to use his wife to extort his grieving sister-in-law to stay out of federal prison. Jasmine is still talking, her voice rising in pitch. She proudly declares that Preston's lead investor trusts him implicitly and that their corporate backing is absolutely rock solid. I read the final paragraph of the forensic audit. Marcus has specifically identified the primary venture capital firm that currently holds the 80% majority stake in Preston's failing startup. It is an umbrella corporation managed entirely by my blind private trust. I look up from my phone screen. I look right into Jasmine's impatient, incredibly entitled face. Preston is not embezzling from a faceless corporate entity. He is actively stealing from me. I am his anonymous lead investor. I lock the screen of my phone, slide it smoothly back into my pocket, and I smile. I lock the screen of my phone, slide it smoothly back into my pocket, and I smile. It is not a warm, sisterly smile. It is the cold, calculated expression of an apex predator watching its prey wander blindly into a meticulously set trap. Jasmine pauses mid-sentence, her perfectly glossed lips parting in sheer confusion. She expects me to argue, to cry, to beg for her understanding, or to frantically call the bank to wire the funds. Instead, I do not offer her a single syllable of explanation. I turn on my heel, grab my keys from the console table, and walk right out the front door of my decoy townhome. I leave her standing completely alone in the middle of my living room, shouting my name in frustration, utterly oblivious to the fact that her visionary husband is about to be federally indicted by the very sister she just insulted. My armored SUV is idling at the curb. My security driver immediately opens the heavy rear door. I slide into the immaculate leather interior, and the vehicle pulls swiftly away from the quiet, ordinary suburban street. We merge onto the highway, leaving the carefully constructed illusion of my struggling freelancer life far behind. 20 minutes later, we pull up to a towering, sleek glass skyscraper in the absolute heart of downtown Atlanta. This building is a fortress of modern capital, a sharp spire of steel and mirrored glass that dominates the city skyline. I step out of the SUV, letting the crisp city wind whip around me. I do not look like a grieving broke mother anymore. During the short ride, I swapped my custom cashmere loungewear for a sharp, impeccably tailored obsidian power suit kept perfectly pressed in the vehicle's hidden wardrobe compartment. I push through the heavy revolving doors and enter the sprawling marble lobby. The transformation in the atmosphere is instantaneous. The massive security team men, who are highly paid to look right through ordinary people, immediately snap to attention. The head of security nods respectfully, bypassing the standard visitor protocols, to swipe his master keycard against the private executive elevator bank. As I walk across the polished stone floor, high-level corporate executives, ruthless hedge fund managers, and high-priced attorneys physically step out of my path. They part like the Red Sea, lowering their voices and offering deferential nods as I pass. They do not know my personal history. They do not know my parents or my ex-husband. They only know my absolute, undeniable power. The private elevator doors slide open on the top floor. I step into my actual workspace, a massive custom-designed corner office with panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking, unobstructed view of the entire Atlanta metropolitan sprawl. This is the empire built entirely on my refusal to break. When Jamal died, the sheer agonizing weight of that grief threatened to drag me into an endless abyss. For months I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, haunted by the piercing sound of that flatline and the agonizing memory of my family abandoning me when I needed them the most. But I did not let the darkness consume me. I weaponized it. I channeled every ounce of my rage, my devastating sorrow, and my brilliant, meticulous mind into a manuscript. I bled onto the pages, writing a raw, devastating thriller under a highly guarded anonymous pseudonym. It was a visceral story about a grieving mother systematically tearing down a corrupt empire to avenge her lost child. The book became a global phenomenon overnight. It spent over a year at the top of every major bestseller list. The publishing world clamored to find out who the anonymous author was, waving massive checks in my direction. But I was not a naive, desperate writer looking for a quick payout. I refused every standard publishing contract. I retained 100% of my intellectual property. I kept the global film and television rights entirely to myself. When the major Hollywood studios came begging for the adaptation rights, I launched my own production and investment holding company. I sat across the negotiating table from the biggest media conglomerates on earth, backed by a ruthless legal team, and secured an exclusive nine-figure streaming deal completely on my own terms. To the general public, the author of the decade's biggest hit is a total ghost. To my superficial parents, my abusive ex-husband, and my arrogant sister, I am just a pathetic, struggling freelancer, living in a rented townhouse. But within the heavily guarded, soundproof walls of this glass skyscraper, I am a recognized titan in the boardroom. I control a vast, diversified portfolio of blind trusts that dictates the survival of major tech startups, commercial real estate developments, and aggressive media acquisitions. I walk over to my massive glass desk and sit down in my high-backed leather chair. I am reviewing the latest quarterly projections when a sharp, respectful double knock sounds against the frosted glass of my office door. Marcus, my head of acquisitions and elite wealth management, steps into the room. He is holding a sleek black leather folio. He does not bother with pleasantries or small talk. He walks directly to my desk, places the folio precisely in front of me, and looks me dead in the eye. He tells me the bank just officially processed the paperwork and formally accepted our anonymous aggressive cash bid. He points to the top document, a warranty deed bearing the seal of the state. He confirms that I am now the sole undisputed legal owner of Vernon and Clarice's foreclosed luxury estate. I look down at the heavy cream-colored warranty deed resting on the polished mahogany of my desk. The gold foil seal of the state of Georgia catches the ambient light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For 2 agonizing, transformative years, I have meticulously arranged every single piece on this board. I did not just survive the devastation of losing my son and the betrayal of my entire family. I studied them. I tracked their movements, their desperate grasps for status, and their financial vulnerabilities. Now the trap is fully set. I open the first digital file on my monitor. It contains the comprehensive forensic audit of Preston's failing technology startup. My arrogant brother-in-law has spent the last 36 months posturing as a Silicon Valley prodigy, attending exclusive galas, and buying luxury cars on company credit. He truly believed he was outsmarting the system. He never once suspected that the anonymous lead investor pumping capital into his venture was the same woman his wife constantly ridiculed. The audit clearly maps out his frantic, sloppy embezzlement. He has been siphoning investor funds into private accounts to maintain his lavish lifestyle, and now the walls are closing in. By holding his debt and controlling the majority stake through my blind trust, I possess the absolute power to dismantle his entire professional existence. With one phone call to the Securities and Exchange Commission, Preston will trade his tailored suits for a federal jumpsuit. I slide the physical deed to my parents' estate to the center of my desk. Vernon and Clarice purchased that sprawling 6-bedroom colonial mansion purely as a monument to their own vanity. They needed a physical manifestation of their perceived superiority to parade in front of their mega-church congregation. They sacrificed their grandson's final moments to protect their social standing. Now their beloved status symbol belongs entirely to me. I trace the embossed lettering with my index finger. I am no longer their disappointing, struggling daughter. I am officially their landlord. I have the absolute legal authority to evict them onto the street with 30 days' notice. The profound poetic justice of holding their shelter in my hands is a quiet, intoxicating thrill. Next, I pull up the encrypted dossier my private investigators compiled on Trevon. My ex-husband stood in the elementary school parking lot just hours ago, wearing an expensive navy suit and threatening to take my surviving children simply because he believed I lacked the financial resources to fight him. He mocked my custom cashmere and called me a broke writer. Yet the financial disclosures flashing across my screen reveal the pathetic, fraudulent reality of his life. Trevon has been aggressively crying poverty in family court for 2 years, claiming his pharmaceutical sales commissions dried up so he could legally avoid paying a single dime of child support for Malik and Surry. The forensic accountants followed the digital crumbs he thought he so cleverly disguised. Trevon has been actively laundering hundreds of thousands of dollars through a network of obscure offshore shell companies. He hid his bonuses and diverted his assets to fund his luxurious new life, with his young girlfriend, deliberately starving his own children of financial support to satisfy his monumental ego. A lesser woman would scream. A woman still tethered to her emotions would call him weeping in frustration or rage at the fundamental unfairness of it all. I do not get mad. I get tactical. Anger is a fleeting, chaotic emotion, and calculated ruin is permanent. I reach for my custom-weighted fountain pen. I uncap it with a sharp, satisfying click. I sign my legal alias across the bottom of the foreclosure takeover documents, officially sealing my absolute ownership of Vernon and Clarice's estate. I hand the thick stack of papers back to Marcus, who stands silently at attention waiting for my next directive. I turn my attention back to the glowing monitors. I open a highly secure encrypted communication portal directly linked to the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division. I do not write an emotional plea. I attach the heavily documented spreadsheet containing Trevin's offshore routing numbers, the exact dates of his fraudulent asset transfers, and the corresponding tax returns where he blatantly committed perjury under penalty of federal law. I type a brief, sterile message outlining his deliberate tax evasion and willful concealment of income. I hover my cursor over the send button for exactly 1 second, allowing the sheer gravity of the moment to settle in my bones, and then I click it. The file vanishes into the digital ether, a silent, untraceable missile aimed directly at Trevon's fraudulent life. I lean back in my leather chair, letting out a long, steady breath. The board is set. The pieces are moving. The absolute destruction of the people who abandoned me in the darkest hour of my life is no longer a fantasy. It is a scheduled logistical certainty. Before I can even take a sip of the sparkling water resting on my coaster, the heavy glass door of my office swings open. My executive assistant Elena walks in briskly. She usually moves with a calm, unshakable professionalism, but right now her eyes are wide and her tablet is clutched tightly to her chest. She stops just short of my desk, tapping the screen of her device with a frantic energy. She looks up at me, her voice tight with disbelief. She tells me that Clarice just went completely public. She says my mother has just posted a massive dramatic prayer request on the main page of their megachurch's Facebook group. She informs me that Clarice tagged all of my old high school friends, dozens of extended family members, and the senior pastor. Elena turns the tablet around so I can see the screen. She reads the glaring bold text out loud, telling me my mother is publicly begging the congregation to pray for my soul, officially calling me a deadbeat, mentally unstable mother who is actively trying to destroy her own family. I take the tablet from Elena's trembling hands. The screen is bright, displaying the main feed of the Greater Zion Fellowship, the sprawling megachurch. My parents treat like an exclusive country club. Clarice has outdone herself. She has posted a professionally lit, tragically angled photograph of herself and Vernon standing in front of their foreclosed estate. The caption is a masterpiece of absolute weaponized victimhood. She claims the devil is testing their faith through financial hardship. She explicitly names me, detailing how she practically begged her own flesh and blood for a mere $150,000 to save the family legacy, only to be cruelly turned away. She does not mention that she ignored my dying son. She does not mention that she is begging for money to fund her country club dues and luxury car leases. She simply paints me as a financially reckless, morally bankrupt daughter who has lost her mind and abandoned her Christian duty. I scroll down with a steady finger. The comments section is a digital firing squad. Dozens of nosy church aunties women, who have spent decades judging everyone from the safety of their wooden pews, are actively sharpening their pitchforks. Sister Margaret types out a long, rambling paragraph about how a child who turns her back on her parents will face divine judgment. Mother Davis quotes scripture loudly, commanding me to honor my mother and father or face eternal ruin. My personal cell phone resting on my desk begins to vibrate continuously. The lock screen lights up with unsolicited text messages from distant cousins and self-righteous church members, all eagerly piling on to lecture me about family loyalty and basic morality. Elena watches me closely, her professional composure returning. She asks if I want the legal department to immediately draft a comprehensive cease and desist order for public defamation. She reminds me that we have the capital to bury Clarice in civil court for this blatant character assassination. I hand the tablet back to her and shake my head. I tell Elena that a cease and desist is a defensive maneuver. It implies that I am afraid of the damage they can cause. I am not playing defense anymore. I instruct Elena to do nothing. I want the post to stay up. I want the comments to multiply. I want my parents to feel the intoxicating, deeply arrogant rush of believing they have successfully cornered me. I know exactly how Greater Zion Fellowship operates. It is not a place of spiritual reflection. It is a social stock exchange for Atlanta's most aggressive social climbers. Vernon is a senior elder there, sitting proudly in the velvet-lined front rows. Trevon brings his new wife every single week to parade his fake redemption arc, acting like the devoted family man he never was. Jasmine and Preston use the post-service VIP brunch to aggressively network with local politicians and gullible investors, pitching their fraudulent startup over mimosas and catered pastries. Sunday service is their absolute favorite stage. They believe that by weaponizing their congregation, they can shame me into submission. They think the old Keisha, the woman who desperately craved their approval and was terrified of public confrontation, will simply transfer the $150,000 just to make the whispering stop. They are banking on my silence. They are banking on my shame. I look at Elena and issue a new directive. I tell her to log into the church's elite member portal. I instruct her to formally RSVP my name for this upcoming Sunday's VIP service and secure a seat for me at the highly exclusive Elders Brunch immediately following the sermon. I am not going to hide in my glass fortress. I am going to walk directly into the lion's den. Friday evening arrives with a quiet, charged anticipation. My private stylist, a meticulous, highly sought-after woman named Sophia, arrives at my penthouse. She wheels in 3 heavy racks of spectacular haute couture. She has pulled the most aggressive, dominating pieces from Paris and Milan. There are structured Tom Ford power suits in deep crimson razor-sharp Chanel blazers and intimidating architectural dresses designed to make the wearer look like an untouchable monarch. She assumes I want to walk into that church and visually crush every single person who doubted me. I walk slowly down the line of magnificent garments, running my hands over silk and imported wool. I shake my head. I tell Sophia that wearing a $10,000 power suit is a massive tactical error. If I walk into Greater Zion Fellowship dripping in obvious aggressive wealth, their defenses will instantly go up. They will smell the money. Vultures are incredibly adaptable to wealth. If they realize I have power, they will immediately change their strategy. They will pivot from public shaming to desperate manipulative begging. I cannot allow them to change their posture. I need them to remain arrogant, bloated with their false sense of superiority, and entirely convinced that they have the upper hand. I walk past the designer racks and open the doors to my personal closet. I reach deep into the back, pushing past my current wardrobe, and pull out a dress from 3 years ago. It is a dull, off-the-rack beige shift dress. It is shapeless, faded, and completely unremarkable. It is the exact kind of garment a defeated, exhausted, financially ruined woman would wear when crawling back to her family to beg for forgiveness. Sophia looks at the cheap fabric with visible horror. She asks me why I would ever willingly put on something so thoroughly uninspiring for such a critical confrontation. I hold the beige dress up against my body and look at my reflection in the full-length mirror. I see the perfect disguise. I tell Sophia that this dress is the ultimate bait. When I walk through those heavy church doors, I want them to look at me and see exactly what they expect to see. I want Trevon to see the broke writer he mocked in the parking lot. I want Jasmine to see the useless sister she demanded money from. I want Clarice and Vernon to see the broken daughter they think they have successfully shamed into submission. I want them to underestimate me one last time. The heavy glass doors of Greater Zion Fellowship swing open, welcoming us into a cavernous gold-leafed foyer that feels more like a luxury shopping mall than a sanctuary. I grip Malik and Zuri's hands tightly. I am wearing the faded beige shift dress exactly as I planned. It hangs off my frame, devoid of shape or style, the absolute picture of a defeated, desperate woman. The moment my flat, sensible shoes step onto the imported marble, the whispering begins. I can feel the sharp, judgmental eyes of the congregation burning into my back. Sister Margaret and Mother Davis are clustered by the welcome center, pausing their polite chatter to stare at me with undisguised pity. My mother's Facebook post has done its job perfectly. They all look at me and see a deadbeat, unstable mother crawling back to the holy flock for charity. I keep my chin level and my expression completely blank. Suddenly, a loud theatrical gasp echoes across the foyer. Clarice. She is dressed in an extravagant royal purple suit, complete with a matching wide-brimmed fascinator. She raises both hands toward the vaulted ceiling, putting on a spectacular performance for her wealthy peers. She loudly praises the Lord for bringing her lost, struggling daughter back into the light. She rushes across the polished floor, her heavy perfume hitting me a second before she wraps her arms around me. It is a suffocating, aggressive embrace. She buries her face into my neck, making sure the surrounding elders can see the picture of a forgiving, long-suffering Christian mother. But beneath the facade, her grip is like a vice. She leans in her lips, brushing my ear, dropping her voice to a harsh, venomous hiss that only I can hear. She tells me that the theatrical pity party ends today. She says I have exactly until Friday to transfer the $150,000 into her account. If the money is not there, she promises that Vernon will personally call Trevin's lawyer and testify against me in family court to ensure I lose full custody of my children. She pulls back, flashing a blinding camera-ready smile, and loudly tells the crowd how blessed we are to be reunited. I do not blink. I do not react. I simply stare into her calculating eyes, fully aware that the deed to her extravagant home is currently sitting on my mahogany desk in a high-security vault downtown. The service is a blur of hypocritical sermons and aggressive tithing pitches. I sit quietly in the back row, playing the role of the chastised outcast to absolute perfection. When the final prayer concludes, the congregation floods into the sprawling fellowship hall for the weekly networking hour, disguised as a coffee social. I guide Malik and Zuri to the children's supervised breakfast buffet, ensuring they are safely occupied with pancakes and coloring books. As I turn away from the buffet table, a heavy hand clamps down on my shoulder. I turn around to find Preston blocking my path. My brother-in-law stands entirely too close, practically trapping me against the edge of the coffee station. He is wearing a custom-fitted gray suit, reeking of expensive sandalwood cologne and unearned arrogance. He aggressively adjusts the cuffs of his shirt, making absolutely sure the fluorescent lights catch the face of his massive gold Rolex. He looks me up and down, taking in the cheap beige fabric of my dress with a sneer of profound amusement. He leans his weight against the table, smirking down at me. He tells me Jasmine was furious when she came home yesterday. He shakes his head, clicking his tongue in mock disappointment. He says she told him I flat out refused to co-sign the business loan. He laughs, a dry, grating sound, and tells me it is classic, typical broke mentality to fear leveraging debt for massive gains. He boasts that his startup is playing in the big leagues now, securing massive rounds of funding from elite, anonymous investors who actually understand vision. He tells me I will regret not getting in on the ground floor when he rings the bell at the stock exchange. He pauses, taking a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes gleaming with sheer condescension. He leans in closer and tells me he actually feels sorry for me. He says his lead housekeeper just quit without notice. He smiles, a predatory, humiliating grin, and offers me a lifeline. He tells me that if I come over to his estate twice a week to scrub his floors and clean his bathrooms, he will toss me $2,000 a month under the table to help me pay my pathetic legal fees. I waits for the insult to land, expecting me to flush with shame or storm off in tears. Instead, I stand my ground. I do not break eye contact. The sheer hilarious irony of a man bragging about funding from an anonymous investor while actively attempting to hire that exact same investor to scrub his toilets is almost too exquisite to bear. I let a slow, freezing smile spread across my face. I look Preston dead in the eye, my voice dropping to a perfectly calm, icy register. I tell him he should probably save that $2,000 for his upcoming legal defense fund. Preston's smug smile instantly falters. His brow furrows in genuine sudden confusion. His brain frantically tries to process the sudden terrifying shift in my posture, searching for a reason why the broke woman in front of him suddenly sounds like an executioner. He opens his mouth to demand an explanation, but before a single word can leave his lips, a sudden hush falls over the entire fellowship hall. The heavy double doors at the entrance swing wide open. The crowd parts immediately. Trevin strides confidently into the room, his arm wrapped tightly around the waist of his young, glamorous new fiancée. The heavy oak doors of the fellowship hall swing shut behind Trevon. He walks with the exaggerated, heavy-footed swagger of a man who believes he fundamentally owns the room. His new fiancée clings tightly to his arm, teetering on impractical stilettos and draped in a blindingly white, heavily branded designer dress that looks entirely too fragile for a Sunday morning coffee social. She scans the room with a practiced, haughty gaze until her eyes land directly on me. Her lips instantly curl into a sharp, undisguised sneer as she takes in my faded, shapeless beige dress. She looks at my clothing, as if poverty is an infectious disease, leaning into Trevon and whispering something behind her manicured hand, while gesturing subtly in my direction. Trevon's eyes lock onto mine. He detaches himself from his fiancée and marches straight across the polished floor, completely ignoring the church elders who step forward attempting to greet him. The surrounding congregation senses the incoming drama. Sister Margaret and Mother Davis literally stop mid-sentence, leaning forward over the coffee urns with undisguised predatory curiosity. Preston, still visibly confused by my icy comment about his legal defense fund, takes a quick, cowardly step backward. He is eager to distance himself from the incoming wreckage, perfectly happy to watch me burn. Trevin stops mere inches from my face. He does not offer a greeting. He does not ask about Malik or Surry. He simply thrusts a thick, heavy manila envelope directly against my chest, forcing me to either take it or let it fall to the marble floor. I take the envelope. The thick official seal of the Fulton County Family Court is stamped aggressively across the front. It is an emergency ex parte custody hearing notice. It is a ruthless legal maneuver designed to ambush a parent, an aggressive strike meant to rip children from their home with zero warning. Trevin filed this assuming I am completely broke, completely unrepresented, and entirely incapable of fighting a 48-hour legal deadline. He thinks he has cornered a mouse. Trevin makes sure his voice carries. He wants an audience. He wants the entire megachurch congregation to witness my ultimate humiliating defeat. He puffs out his chest, his voice booming effortlessly over the low hum of the fellowship hall. He loudly declares that he is taking the boys. He gestures broadly at my unremarkable, cheap-looking dress, loudly proclaiming to the room that I cannot even afford to keep the lights on in my rented townhouse. His fiancée steps up beside him, crossing her arms and looking down her nose at me. Trevin pulls her close, flashing a blinding, predatory smile at the surrounding elders. He announces that his new wife actually has a real, respectable corporate job. He proudly states that she can provide a stable, luxurious environment, unlike the pathetic, delusional fantasy world I am currently living in. He leans in, lowering his voice just enough to make his next words feel like a private, fatal stabbing, though the venom easily reaches the eager ears of the bystanders. He calls me a complete, irredeemable failure. Then he delivers the absolute kill shot. He looks me dead in the eye and says, I am going to fail Malik and Surry just exactly like I failed Jamal. The air violently leaves my lungs. The entire room spins, the bright overhead lights suddenly blinding. The sheer, suffocating audacity of his words threatens to physically bring me to my knees. This is the exact man who sat sipping vintage wine at an exclusive corporate tasting while our 10-year-old son flatlined in a sterile hospital room. This is the man who audibly sighed into the receiver and complained that my frantic, sobbing phone calls were ruining his important networking evening. Now he is standing in the middle of a holy sanctuary, weaponizing the tragic death of the son he callously abandoned to secure custody of the children he barely even knows. He has entirely rewritten history to make himself the savior and me the villain. I instinctively look past his shoulder, desperately seeking any sign of intervention, any shred of familial protection. Vernon and Clarice are standing less than 15 feet away, by the catered pastry table. They heard every single word. My father holds a porcelain coffee cup halfway to his mouth, his expression completely blank. My mother casually adjusts the brim of her extravagant purple fascinator. then reaches out to take a delicate bite of a croissant. They do absolutely nothing. They watch their former son-in-law publicly gut their own daughter, and they simply turn their heads away. They actively choose the preservation of their pristine, wealthy social image over protecting their own flesh and blood. They are entirely complicit in my execution. I am completely alone in this room. My hands shake. The muscles in my arms pull tight. The primal urge to raise my palm and slap the arrogant, cruel smirk right off Trevin's face is a blazing, uncontrollable fire in my veins. But a slap is exactly what he wants. A public physical altercation is exactly what a hysterical, broken woman would do. It would immediately justify his emergency custody filing and give my parents the ultimate excuse to finally wash their hands of me. I do not slap him. I close my eyes for a fraction of a second and take a slow, agonizingly deep breath. I force the blazing fire of my rage downward, locking it away in a vault inside my chest. I let the anger completely solidify into pure concentrated ice. I open my eyes. The cavernous fellowship hall is so silent, I can hear the low hum of the industrial refrigerators behind the catering tables. Every single person in my immediate vicinity is holding their breath. They are all waiting for the stereotypical breakdown. They want the shouting match. They want the tears. They want to see the bitter broke ex-wife throw a pathetic tantrum in the middle of God's house. I refuse to give them the satisfaction of the public spectacle. Instead, I let the tension stretch out until it becomes physically uncomfortable. I look down at the heavy manila envelope in my hands, tracing the raised seal of the family court with a trembling thumb. It is not a real tremble, but a carefully manufactured tremor that I allow to vibrate through my wrists and up my arms. I let my shoulders slump forward, collapsing my posture to physically embody the broken, destitute woman they all so desperately need me to be. I let the fight drain out of my eyes, replacing it with a hollow, haunted exhaustion. I look up, shifting my gaze from one face to the next, playing my role with absolute terrifying precision. I look at Vernon. My father refuses to meet my eye, suddenly very interested in the dregs of his black coffee, maintaining his cowardly silence. I look at Clarice, whose lips are pursed in a triumphant, vindicated line beneath her extravagant purple fascinator. I look at Jasmine and Preston. They are standing shoulder to shoulder, practically vibrating with greedy anticipation at the thought of finally getting their hands on my signature to leverage their fraudulent startup. Finally, I lock eyes with Trevon. His new fiancée is still smirking, clutching his bicep like a prized trophy, her eyes scanning my plain beige dress with total disgust. Trevon's chest is puffed out, his massive ego expanding to fill the room. He genuinely believes he has broken me. He believes the calculated mention of Jamal was the fatal emotional blow that finally shattered my resolve. I let a single heavy, ragged breath escape my lips. I drop my chin slightly, looking up at them through my lashes, the ultimate picture of submission. Fine, I say. I pitch my voice low, injecting it with the perfect fragile frequency of utter defeat. It trembles just enough to sound authentic, just enough to make them feel powerful. You win. The words hang in the air, sweet as nectar to their ears. I see Preston exchange a rapid, greedy glance with Jasmine. Clarice visibly perks up her posture, straightening as she prepares to accept my surrender. All of you, I continue, letting my voice crack slightly. I cannot fight you anymore. I do not have the strength left. I do not have the resources to keep battling my own family and my ex-husband. You have completely backed me into a corner, and I have nothing left to give. Trevin smiles, a slow, deeply self-satisfied grin that makes my skin crawl. He opens his mouth to gloat, to twist the knife a little deeper in front of his audience, but I cut him off before he can ruin the momentum of my performance. I will stop fighting, I say, wrapping my arms around my torso defensively, making myself look even smaller. But we are not doing this here, not in front of the congregation, not in the middle of a church social hour where everyone can watch. Clarice steps forward, her eyes narrowing with a brief flash of suspicion. She asks me what exactly I am proposing. She demands to know if this is another one of my delaying tactics to avoid paying my obligations to the family. I shake my head, looking directly at the polished marble floor before raising my eyes to meet hers, with practiced desperation. No tactics, no more running. I am done. Come to 4500 Blackwood Estate this Friday night at 8 p.m. Bring your lawyers. Bring the business loan papers you want me to co-sign. Bring the custody surrender forms. I turn my gaze directly to Trevon, letting a single tear pool perfectly in the corner of my eye without falling. Bring everything. I will sign whatever you put in front of me. I will give you exactly what you deserve. The address registers in the air. 4500 Blackwood Estate. It is a legendary property in the affluent northern suburbs, a sprawling, hyper-secure compound known for its massive iron gates sweeping private drives and elite neighborhood association. It is the kind of address that makes local real estate agents salivate and ambitious social climbers weep with envy. Preston frowns, clearly thrown off by the location. He steps forward, his arrogant smirk returning. He asks me why we are meeting at a multi-million-dollar private estate instead of a cheap diner or a mediator's dingy office. He asks if I am working as a maid there, scrubbing their luxury floors, just like he suggested 5 minutes ago. I nod slowly, keeping my eyes downcast, playing directly into his overwhelming prejudice. I tell them that the owners are currently traveling out of the country for the month. I explain that they occasionally let the domestic staff use the library for personal meetings if approved in advance. I tell them it is the only place I can guarantee total privacy so we can quietly finalize our miserable family business without the public spectacle they so clearly crave. It is a lie so perfectly tailored to their vanity that they swallow it whole. It confirms their lowest possible opinion of me. It paints me exactly how they want to see me, as a pathetic, subservient domestic employee, begging for literal crumbs of space from her wealthy masters. It validates every single cruel thing they have ever said about my life choices. Trevin laughs. It is a loud, triumphant, booming sound that echoes off the vaulted ceiling of the fellowship hall. He pulls his fiancée closer, kissing her temple before looking back at me with absolute disdain. He tells me that Friday at 8 p.m. works perfectly for his busy schedule. He tells me to have a working pen ready, because he is not going to waste more than 15 minutes of his Friday night dealing with a failure. Clarice steps forward, smoothing the front of her purple skirt. She nods, deeply satisfied with the total subjugation of her defiant daughter. She tells me that she will have the $150,000 family support agreement drafted by Vernon's personal attorney and ready for my signature. She reminds me that this is my absolute last chance to honor my parents and redeem my soul before the eyes of the Lord. Jasmine simply smirks, whispering to Preston about how easy it was to finally break my stubborn streak. They do not say goodbye. They turn their backs on me. They walk away in a unified, arrogant pack, heading toward the heavy oak doors of the VIP brunch room. They are practically floating on air, completely intoxicated by the rush of their perceived victory. They are already visualizing the money hitting their accounts, the custody papers being stamped, the total and unconditional surrender of the family scapegoat. I watch them walk away, keeping my shoulders slumped until the heavy doors swing shut behind them, sealing them inside their echo chamber of wealth and delusion. Once they are entirely out of sight, I stand up perfectly straight. I roll my shoulders back, feeling the tension evaporate from my spine. I smooth the cheap, rough fabric of my beige dress. They have absolutely no idea what they have just agreed to. They have no idea that 4500 Blackwood Estate is not just a rich family's house, but a hyper-secure, technologically fortified compound, equipped with closed-circuit cameras and high-definition digital recording devices hidden in every single room. They have no idea that the narrative about the owners being out of town is a carefully constructed, fabricated trap. Most importantly, they are completely, blissfully unaware that I do not scrub the floors at Blackwood Estate. I own it. I bought the $12 million property in cash using my blind trust 3 weeks ago. I hold the pristine, unencumbered deed. It is my private fortress, and I control every single lock on the doors. I look down at the emergency custody papers. Trevin shoved into my hands. I fold them neatly and place them inside my bag. I turn around and walk toward the children's area to collect Malik and Surry. Friday night is rapidly approaching. The board is set, the bait has been swallowed whole, and their scheduled destruction is officially on the calendar. The digital clock on the command center console flips to exactly 8 o'clock on Friday night. I am standing in the fortified security room on the third floor of 4500 Blackwood Estate, watching a bank of ultra-high-definition monitors. Through the infrared cameras, I watch two vehicles approach the massive wrought iron security gates that guard the entrance to the property. One is a late-model Mercedes SUV that I know for a fact Preston is leasing at an exorbitant interest rate. The other is a black town car undoubtedly rented by Trevon to make himself look important. The intercom chimes. My hired head of security, a towering former military contractor named Marcus, presses the release button without saying a single word. The heavy iron gates glide open silently. The two vehicles creep up the quarter-mile sweeping circular driveway, their headlights illuminating the ancient meticulously manicured oak trees lining the path. I watch them step out of their cars. Vernon, Clarice, Jasmine, Preston, and Trevon. Trevon has brought in an attorney, a sweaty, anxious-looking man, clutching a thick leather briefcase. They all stand on the imported cobblestone driveway, craning their necks backward to take in the imposing floodlit stone facade of the $12 million compound. Even through the silent security feed, I can see the visceral envy twisting their features. They look like bitter peasants standing outside a palace, desperately trying to project an air of belonging. Marcus opens the heavy front doors and steps aside, gesturing for them to enter. He does not offer them a greeting or take their coats. He simply points toward the main foyer and returns to his post. I switch the audio feed on. They step into the cavernous, sprawling expanse of the main foyer. The floors are flawless imported Italian marble. The ceiling stretches 30 feet upward, crowned by a cascading tiered crystal chandelier that casts a brilliant fractured light across the room. The sheer scale of the architecture is designed to intimidate, and it is working. But true to their nature, my family immediately attempts to mask their deep insecurity with loud performative arrogance. Preston's voice echoes harshly through the vast space as he lets out a grating, condescending laugh. He shoves his hands into the pockets of his suit pants, sneering at the grand, sweeping staircase. He tells Jasmine that it looks like Keisha finally begged one of her rich freelance clients to let her borrow their house for the night just to save face. Jasmine snorts in agreement, adjusting the strap of her heavily branded, completely counterfeit designer handbag. She mutters that I am probably house-sitting for a wealthy family and decided to play pretend for the evening to make myself feel less pathetic about losing my kids. They are entirely incapable of comprehending a reality where I am not beneath them. Their absolute conviction in my inferiority is the exact weapon I am using to destroy them. Trevon marches into the center of the foyer, looking around with absolute disdain. He snaps his fingers at his attorney, gesturing toward a custom-built $50,000 mahogany dining table situated near the parlor entrance. The lawyer carelessly drops his scuffed heavy leather briefcase directly onto the polished wood, treating the priceless antique like a cheap folding table at a flea market. He unsnaps the brass locks with a loud click, pulling out the ruthless custody surrender forms Trevon expects me to sign in tears. Trevon loudly assures the lawyer that this will take less than 10 minutes, claiming I am completely broke, emotionally shattered, and ready to yield. Clarice paces the marble floor, running her hand critically along the edge of a priceless Ming vase displayed on a pedestal. She audibly sighs, telling Vernon that the decor is entirely too modern and lacks spiritual warmth. She loudly wishes she had this kind of square footage for her church socials, conveniently and entirely forgetting the fact that the bank foreclosed on her own sprawling estate just days ago, because she squandered her mortgage payments on country club dues and luxury cars. Vernon merely taps his leather shoe impatiently against the marble, complaining that I have shown immense disrespect by making the elder of the family drive all the way out to the northern suburbs just to sign some legal paperwork. I listen to their cruel, familiar banter through the hidden speakers. These are the exact same voices that mocked my grief when Jamal was dying. These are the exact same people who sat at Thanksgiving dinners and loudly dissected my financial struggles as if my suffering was a spectator sport. They are so incredibly comfortable in their arrogance. They have already divided my remaining dignity among themselves like spoils of war. It is time to collect the debt. I turn away from the security monitors. I take a slow, deep breath, feeling the cold, absolute certainty locking into place in my chest. I step out of the security room and walked down the quiet carpeted hallway toward the grand balcony overlooking the foyer. I am no longer wearing the faded, shapeless beige dress from the Sunday church service. I am no longer the exhausted, terrified mother wearing worn-out sweatpants begging her family for a scrap of financial mercy. I am wearing a stunning razor-sharp $10,000 Alexander McQueen suit in a deep, unapologetic shade of sapphire blue. The tailoring is merciless, fitting my frame with lethal precision. A brilliant cascade of flawless VVS diamonds rests perfectly at my throat, catching the ambient light and throwing sparks of pure wealth across the walls. My hair is sleek, my posture is absolute iron, and my red-soled Christian Louboutin heels click with a sharp, predatory rhythm against the hardwood floor. I reach the top of the grand sweeping staircase. I place my hands firmly on the heavy carved oak double doors that separate the upper landing from the main foyer. I push them open. The heavy doors swing wide with a smooth, echoing thud. I step out onto the landing bathed in the brilliant light of the crystal chandelier. Down below, the cruel laughter instantly dies in Preston's throat. Jasmine's hand freezes on the strap of her fake bag. Clarice drops her hand from the Ming vase as if the porcelain just burned her skin. Vernon's impatient tapping abruptly ceases. Trevin's smug, victorious smile vanishes completely wiped from his face, as his eyes dart from the blinding diamonds at my throat to the lethal cut of my designer suit. I stand perfectly still at the top of the marble stairs, looking down at the people who tried to bury me. Silence drops over the cavernous room like a heavy, suffocating stone. I take my first step down the sweeping marble staircase. The sharp, rhythmic crack of my red-soled heels echoes through the cavernous foyer like the ticking of a metronome. I move slowly, deliberately, forcing them to watch my descent. With every step, the carefully constructed illusion they have held onto for years crumbles a little more. I watch their faces cycle through rapid, violent stages of denial. Clarice has a hand pressed flat against her chest, her mouth slightly parted as she stares at the flawless diamonds resting against my collarbone. Jasmine's eyes dart frantically over the immaculate tailoring of my sapphire blue Alexander McQueen suit, her brain desperately trying to calculate the retail cost. Preston has stopped smirking entirely. He shifts his weight from foot to foot, the arrogant swagger he carried through the front doors completely evaporating. Trevin stands rigid, his jaw clenched so tightly, a muscle twitches in his cheek. His lawyer takes a subtle, highly unprofessional half-step backward, his survival instincts clearly overriding his retainer fee. I reach the bottom of the stairs and walk directly toward the $50,000 custom mahogany table. I do not greet them. I do not offer them a seat on the imported leather sofas in the adjacent parlor. I do not ask my staff to bring them sparkling water or expensive scotch. They are not honored guests in my home. They are hostile trespassers who have arrived to collect a ransom, and I intend to treat them exactly as such. I position myself at the head of the table. I rest my fingertips lightly on the polished wood and look at them. The silence stretches out heavy and suffocating, wrapping around their throats, until the tension becomes physically unbearable. Vernon is the first to break. He cannot stand the absolute authority radiating from my posture. His entire identity is built on being the loudest, most dominant man in any room, and his patriarchal ego simply cannot process my silence. He aggressively steps forward, reaching into his tailored jacket. He pulls out a thick stack of legal documents and slaps them violently onto the mahogany table. He points a stiff finger at me, his voice booming with forced manufactured authority. He tells me to cut the theatrics, Keisha. He says he knows exactly what kind of game I am playing. He loudly claims that I must be sleeping with the owner of this estate, or embezzling funds from a wealthy freelance client to put on this ridiculous, desperate charade. He taps his heavy gold ring against the top page of the contract. He demands that I sign over whatever secret money I am hiding from this client of mine to cover the $150,000 I owe the family. Trevin immediately catches Vernon's aggressive energy. He refuses to be emasculated in front of his former father-in-law. He steps up to the table, ripping the emergency ex parte custody surrender forms from his lawyer's trembling hands. He tosses the documents aggressively, letting them slide across the polished wood until they hit Vernon's demand contract. He puffs out his chest completely, ignoring the reality of the $12 million fortress surrounding him. He tells me to sign the kids over Keisha. He sneers, leaning over the table to invade my physical space. He tells me I am completely out of my league, that a fancy borrowed suit does not make me a fit mother, and that he will destroy me in family court by Friday morning. Jasmine practically shoves her way past Trevon. Her eyes are blazing with raw, unfiltered greed. She slams Preston's business loan cosign papers down next to the other two stacks. She glares at me, her voice rising to a shrill, demanding pitch. She states that if I have access to this kind of capital, I have a moral obligation to help my own sister. She tells me to sign the guarantor forms immediately so Preston can secure his startup funding, or she will personally ensure I am permanently blacklisted from every family event for the rest of my life. They stand shoulder to shoulder on the opposite side of the table. They are a united front of absolute suffocating entitlement. They have laid their demands out like a firing squad, fully expecting me to panic, weep, and surrender my signature just to make their aggressive shouting stop. They are still operating under the delusion that they have the upper hand. I look down at the 3 stacks of paper. I do not say a word. I calmly reach out. I place my hands on the documents. I gather Vernon's extortion demand, Trevon's malicious custody surrender forms, and Jasmine's parasitic loan papers into a single combined pile. I tap the bottom edge of the papers against the mahogany table, squaring them up neatly, aligning the edges with absolute meticulous precision. The family watches me in breathless silence. They mistake my calm organization for submission. Clarice lets out a long, audible sigh of relief. Trevon crosses his arms, a triumphant, sickeningly smug smile returning to his face. Vernon nods approvingly, reaching into his pocket to retrieve a silver Montblanc pen for me to use. I do not reach for the pen. Instead, I move my left hand under the lip of the custom mahogany table. I locate the concealed flush-mounted brass button installed directly into the wood. I press it. A sleek rectangular panel in the center of the table smoothly slides open. A heavy-duty commercial-grade industrial shredder seamlessly rises from the concealed compartment, locking into place with a quiet, expensive mechanical hum. Vernon freezes the silver pen halfway out of his pocket. Trevon's smug smile instantly vanishes. Jasmine gasps, taking a sudden step back. I maintain unbroken deadpan eye contact with Vernon. I slide the thick, perfectly aligned stack of their combined demands directly into the steel blades. The heavy-duty motor roars to life. The sound is violent and absolute. The steel blades grab the thick parchment, tearing through the legal jargon, the extortion demands, and the custody threats with merciless efficiency. The machine grinds their supreme entitlement into hundreds of thin, meaningless white ribbons. The shredded confetti drops silently into the concealed bin below. The sound of the shredder finishing its work and spinning down to a quiet hum fills the massive room. I brush a microscopic speck of paper dust off the lapel of my Alexander McQueen suit. I look up at my family. Their jaws are slack. Their eyes are wide with profound, sudden terror. The physical destruction of their paperwork has finally shattered their delusion. They suddenly realize they are not standing in a borrowed house. They suddenly realize I am not playing a game. The mechanical hum of the industrial shredder dies down, leaving behind a silence so profound it rings in my ears. For 3 agonizing seconds, no one moves. They just stare at the empty slot in the mahogany table where their $1 million demands and vicious legal threats just vanished into confetti. Then the shock shatters. Trevon's face twists into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His ego, fragile and massive, simply cannot process the blatant defiance. The veins in his thick neck bulge against his collar as he lunges forward, slamming both of his heavy fists down onto the polished wood of the table. "What the hell are you doing?" he roars, the sound tearing through the elegant room. He leans across the expanse of the table, his eyes wild, spit flying from his lips. "Are you out of your damn mind, Keisha? Do you have any idea what you just did? I brought those custody papers as a courtesy. I am going to call the police right now and have you thrown in a psych ward. I will take Malik and Surry from you permanently by tomorrow morning." Preston immediately joins the chorus, his voice shrill with panic. He steps up beside Trevon, waving his arms frantically. "My loan documents! Those were original notarized copies, you stupid witch. Do you know how much capital is on the line? I am going to sue you for everything you have. Vernon steps forward, his face a terrifying shade of crimson. He points a trembling, furious finger directly at my face. You ungrateful, insolent child, I demand you retrieve those documents right now. You will not disrespect the head of this family in this manner. Clarice is clutching Jasmine's arm, hyperventilating, entirely unable to process the total subjugation of her designated scapegoat. They are a chaotic, screaming mob, hurling threats and insults, completely convinced that if they just yell loud enough, if they just project enough masculine authority and parental dominance, I will inevitably shrink back into the terrified, submissive woman they have bullied for over 3 decades. I do not shrink. I do not flinch. I stand perfectly still at the head of the table, letting the tidal wave of their verbal abuse crash uselessly against me. I wait until Trevin pauses to take a breath, his chest heaving with manufactured outrage. Then, with agonizing slowness, I raise one single manicured finger into the air. I do not say a word, I simply hold my finger up. Instantly, a heavy metallic clack echoes through the grand room. The massive 12-foot mahogany dining room doors swing shut with a forceful slam, the electronic deadbolts engaging with a definitive, inescapable click. The sound cuts through their shouting like a gunshot. Trevin spins around, his eyes darting toward the locked doors. Vernon stops mid-sentence, his pointing finger slowly lowering. From the deep recessed alcoves lining the perimeter of the dining room, the shadows detach themselves. 4 massive, heavily armored private security guards step forward into the bright light. They are dressed in immaculate black tactical suits, their expressions entirely blank, their hands resting comfortably near the holstered weapons at their hips. Marcus, my head of security, steps out from behind a towering marble pillar directly behind Trevon. He crosses his thick, muscular arms over his chest, staring down at my ex-husband with the cold, detached gaze of a predator observing cornered prey. The transformation of the room is instantaneous and absolute. The aggressive shouting dies in their throats. The arrogant swagger melts from their postures. They are suddenly and acutely aware that they are not in a public restaurant. They are not in a church fellowship hall, where social conventions protect them. They are locked inside a heavily fortified private compound, completely surrounded by highly trained professionals who answer exclusively to me. The silence that falls over them now is not born of shock. It is born of pure, paralyzing terror. Jasmine takes a slow, terrified step backward, bumping into Preston, who is staring at the armed guards with his mouth hanging open. Clarice lets out a soft, whimpering gasp, grabbing onto Vernon's suit jacket for dear life. Vernon looks from the locked doors to the guards and finally back to me. His patriarchal authority has entirely vanished, leaving behind nothing but a scared, powerless old man. I place my hands flat on the mahogany table and lean forward slightly. I told you to come here so I could give you what you deserve, I say. I drop my voice to a lethal quiet register. I do not need to shout. True power never has to raise its voice. The acoustics of the grand room carry my whispered words to every corner, chilling the air around them. You walked into this house complaining about the decor, insulting my clothes, and treating my property like a public bus station. You thought you could march in here, snap your fingers, and demand that I finance your pathetic lives and surrender my children just to make your problems disappear. I look directly into Vernon's terrified eyes. You demanded my money. I shift my gaze to Preston. You demanded my signature. Finally, I look at Trevon, whose face has gone completely ashen, beads of cold sweat forming along his hairline. And you demanded my flesh and blood. You all stood in front of God and the entire congregation on Sunday and told me I was a failure. You told me I had nothing. I straightened my posture, letting the diamonds at my throat catch the light. Well, you were right about one thing. I brought you here to give you exactly what you have earned, and none of you deserve a single dime. Clarice finally finds her voice, though it is nothing more than a pathetic, trembling croak. Keisha, please, what is this? What are you doing to your family? I ignore her completely. Her tears mean absolutely nothing to me anymore. I reach down into the hidden compartment, beneath the mahogany table. My fingers brush against the smooth, cool leather of the documents I prepared earlier this afternoon. I pull out 3 thick, heavy red leather-bound dossiers, and placed them on the table in front of me. The rich crimson color of the leather stands out violently against the dark wood. These are not mere folders. They are meticulously compiled, weaponized volumes of absolute destruction. Inside these covers lies the forensic accounting. The private investigator reports the hidden emails and the undeniable proof of every single lie, fraud, and betrayal these people have committed over the past decade. The family stares at the red dossiers as if they are live explosives. The air in the room is so thick with anticipation and dread that it is hard to breathe. I pick up the first dossier. It is heavy-weighted with the sins of the man standing in front of me. I look dead into Trevin's panicked, sweating face. I flick my wrist, tossing the heavy red leather dossier across the polished table. It slides smoothly across the mahogany and hits Trevon directly in the center of his chest with a loud, satisfying thud. He instinctively fumbles to catch it, pulling the damning weight of his own secrets against his body. I smile, a cold, merciless expression that does not reach my eyes. Let's start with the deadbeat, shall we? Trevin's thick fingers fumble clumsily against the smooth red leather. He manages to catch the heavy dossier before it slides off the edge of the mahogany table, pulling it against his chest, as if the impact physically knocked the wind out of him. He looks down at the embossed cover, his brow furrowing in deep, panicked confusion. The absolute certainty that he held all the cards just seconds ago is rapidly dissolving into a primal, suffocating fear. His breathing turns shallow and rapid, the sound loud in the dead silence of the room. He flips the heavy cover open. His eyes dart down to the first sheet of crisp white paper. I watch the exact magnificent moment his brain attempts to process the impossible string of numbers printed next to my name. I watch the color completely drain from his face, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. Page 1 is my actual bank statement. I announce, my voice slicing through the heavy air. It is cold, sharp, and entirely devoid of mercy. Take a very close look at the bottom line, Trevon. Count the zeros. You marched into a church fellowship hall on Sunday and loudly announced to the entire congregation that I could not afford to keep the lights on in a rented townhouse. You bet your entire fragile ego on the assumption that I was destitute. That statement proves that I can buy and sell your entire fabricated existence before my morning coffee. Trevin's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. He blinks rapidly, his eyes tracing the 9-figure balance again and again, as if the ink might magically rearrange itself into a number he can comprehend. His hands begin to tremble violently, the thick paper rattling in his grip. Turn to page 2, I command. He obeys mechanically, his fingers clumsy and numb. Page 2 is the executive summary from a team of private investigators and forensic accountants I hired the day you filed your fraudulent custody papers. I state, projecting my voice so every single person in the room hears the absolute destruction of his character. It details every single offshore shell company, every hidden LLC, and every dummy corporation you have used to hide your assets for the past 4 years. It tracks the wire transfers from your fake consulting group straight to the dealership for your leased Porsche. It tracks every single dollar you funneled through the Cayman Islands to avoid paying child support for Malik and Surry. You stood in front of a family court judge, swore under oath that your business was failing, and claimed you were practically bankrupt. Meanwhile, you were wiring hundreds of thousands of dollars to overseas accounts to fund your pathetic need to look like a mogul. Trevin lets out a strangled, breathless sound. He looks up at me, his eyes wide with a terror so pure it is almost intoxicating to witness. Keisha, please, he whispers, his voice cracking. Where did you get this? How did you find? I am not finished. I snap, cutting him off with the precision of a guillotine. Turn to page 3. He swallows hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously as he flips to the third document. The heavy official seal at the top of the page seems to physically press him downward. Page 3 is the confirmed IRS whistleblower report I filed against you and your dummy corporations on Tuesday morning, I announce. I handed over 300 pages of your unredacted financial records, wire transfer receipts, and forged tax returns directly to the federal government. You are not facing a minor civil dispute in family court, Trevon. You are looking at a massive multi-million-dollar federal tax evasion indictment. The IRS has already frozen your accounts. By tomorrow morning, you will not even be able to buy a cup of coffee without a federal agent logging the transaction. The sweaty, anxious lawyer standing next to Trevon suddenly jolts into motion. He leans over Trevon's trembling shoulder, his eyes scanning the IRS confirmation letter and the attached forensic summary. I watch the lawyer's face transform from mild apprehension to sheer unadulterated professional horror. He is a bottom-feeding family court attorney, and he realizes in a fraction of a second that his client has just dragged him directly into the center of a massive federal criminal conspiracy. He knows that the IRS will meticulously audit anyone who has represented Trevon in the past 5 years. The lawyer does not attempt to stammer a defense. He does not offer a single word of legal counsel. He simply takes a rapid, terrified step backward, creating immediate physical distance between himself and his radioactive client. He snatches his scuffed briefcase off my custom dining table, snaps the brass locks shut with a sharp resounding click, and turns on his heel. He practically sprints toward the heavy mahogany doors, waving frantically at Marcus. "Let me out!" The lawyer gasps, his voice high and panicked. "I am no longer representing this man. Let me out of this house right now." I give Marcus a subtle nod. Marcus presses a button on his belt. The heavy doors unlatch. The lawyer throws them open and sprints into the night, abandoning Trevon without a second thought. Trevon's new fiancée watches the lawyer run. She turns her gaze slowly back to Trevon, who is still staring at the red folder, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his ruin. She snatches the dossier right out of his hands. Her eyes scan the bank statements and the IRS filing. I watch the gears turning in her heavily calculated mind. She realizes instantly that the luxurious lifestyle she thought she was marrying into is a complete mirage. She realizes the man standing next to her is not a wealthy, successful entrepreneur, but a broke, fraudulent criminal who is heading straight for a federal penitentiary. Her perfectly contoured face contorts in absolute disgust. "You lied to me," she hisses, her voice dripping with venom. "You told me you were a millionaire. You told me she was the crazy broke ex-wife trying to ruin you. You do not have anything. You are going to prison." "Baby, wait, I can explain." Trevon stammers, reaching out to grab her arm. "I can fix this. Just let me talk to her, I can fix." She slaps his hand away with brutal force. Without a moment of hesitation, she grabs the massive, gaudy engagement ring on her left hand. She yanks it past her knuckle and throws it directly at his face. The heavy diamond hits Trevon squarely in the chest and bounces off, hitting the marble floor with a sharp metallic ping that echoes loudly in the quiet room. "Have fun in a federal cell, you broke loser," she spits. She turns on her impractical stilettos and practically runs toward the open doors, chasing after the lawyer, eager to physically distance herself from the incoming wreckage. Trevon does not go after her. He cannot. The reality of his situation has finally crushed the last remaining pillar of his ego. The man who strutted into my home 30 minutes ago, demanding my children and mocking my clothes, is entirely gone. His legs simply give out beneath him. Trevon drops to his knees on the cold, hard marble. He looks up at me, tears streaming down his face, completely broken. He clasps his hands together, his chest heaving with desperate, pathetic sobs. "Keisha, please!" He begs, his voice echoing pitifully against the walls. "Please do not do this to me. I will drop the custody case. I will never bother you again. Please think about our past. Think about Jamal. Do not let them lock me away." He invokes the name of my dead son to save his own skin. It is the ultimate unforgivable mistake. The tiny, microscopic fraction of pity I might have held for the father of my children instantly evaporates, replaced by a cold, absolute void. I stare down at the pathetic, weeping man on my floor. I do not feel anger. I do not feel sadness. I feel absolutely nothing but the satisfying closure of a transaction. I look past him, fixing my cold gaze on the terrified faces of Vernon, Clarice, Jasmine, and Preston, who are watching Trevon's destruction in paralyzed, breathless silence. "Next," I say coldly. Trevon's pathetic wet sobs echo off the imported marble walls, but I do not spare him a single downward glance. He is a ghost to me now, a problem permanently solved. My eyes lock onto the remaining trio standing on the other side of the mahogany table. Vernon is frozen in place. Clarice is trembling uncontrollably, but Preston is desperately trying to recalibrate. He cannot allow himself to be intimidated by a black woman he has spent years treating as an intellectual inferior. Preston steps around Trevin's kneeling form, deliberately ignoring the shattered man on the floor. He squares his shoulders, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit jacket, puffing out his chest to fill the vacuum of masculine authority. He relies heavily on the unearned, absolute arrogance of his tech bro privilege. He actually has the audacity to smirk, assuming Trevin's fall was just a lucky hit, a fluke born of a sloppy family court dispute. "You think you are smart, Keisha?" Preston asks, his tone dripping with thick, familiar condescension. He shifts his weight, adopting the exact same posture he uses to lecture me at every Thanksgiving dinner. "You hired a good private investigator to catch a deadbeat ex-husband. Congratulations. But do not confuse catching a cheap fraud with actually understanding how the real world operates. You are just a writer. You sit at a laptop and make up little stories for a living. You do not understand capital. You do not understand leverage, equity, or the real business world. You are completely out of your depth here, and playing dress up in a fancy house is not going to save you from your legal obligations." I do not blink. I do not let a single emotion cross my face. I reach down and pick up the second red leather-bound dossier. It is noticeably thicker than Trevin's. I place my hand flat on the cover and slide it across the smooth expanse of the mahogany table. It glides with a menacing whisper, stopping exactly 1 inch from Preston's fingertips. "I understand it perfectly, Preston," I say, my voice steady, dropping to a cold surgical precision. "Tell me, how is Apex Innovations doing?" Preston physically recoils. His smirk vanishes, instantly replaced by a sudden rigid confusion. Apex Innovations is his pride and joy. It is the stealth mode tech startup he has been aggressively pitching to our parents for years. The company he constantly claimed was on the verge of revolutionizing global logistics. He built his entire arrogant persona on the backing of a massive anonymous angel investor who had supposedly recognized his singular genius. "Open it," I command, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. He hesitates, his fingers trembling slightly as he flips the heavy red cover back. "You spent the last 2 years bragging about securing Series A funding from an elite anonymous venture capital firm based out of Silicon Valley." I state, projecting my voice so Jasmine and my parents hear every single devastating syllable. "You told Jasmine you were a visionary. You told Vernon you were the financial savior of this family. You looked down on my career while spending money you never earned. You built your entire life on the backing of that faceless investor." I step slightly to the left, keeping him pinned under my unwavering gaze. "I am that investor, Preston. I used a blind trust and a proxy corporate firm to inject the seed capital into Apex Innovations. I own 80% of your preferred stock. I own your proprietary algorithms. I own your patents. I own you." Preston's mouth opens and closes. He looks like a fish suffocating on dry land. He violently shakes his head, desperately trying to formulate a denial, but his eyes are frantically reading the documents in front of him. He sees my corporate entity names. He sees my signature on the master operating agreement. The reality of his absolute subordination crashes down on him. And because I own the controlling stake, I continue stepping closer to the table to deliver the fatal blow. I have absolute authority over the financial disbursement. I pulled my funding at 3:00 p.m. today. I legally froze every single operational account tied to your name. Apex Innovations is completely insolvent. Your company is dead. You cannot do that. Preston gasps, his voice cracking, the polished tech executive facade completely shattering. "That is a breach of fiduciary duty. You will destroy the company. You will ruin me." "The company was already destroyed, Preston," I reply smoothly. "Turn to page 4. He turns the page with shaking, uncoordinated hands. I watch the realization hit him with the force of a physical strike. "Page 4 is a detailed forensic accounting report of your corporate expenditures," I announce. "It is the undeniable itemized evidence of you embezzling investor funds to pay for Jasmine's lavish lifestyle. You used corporate seed money to lease that Mercedes SUV parked in my driveway. You used capital meant for software development to pay for your anniversary trip to the Maldives. You funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars through fake vendor invoices to fund her shopping sprees and keep up the grand illusion that you were a highly successful CEO. Jasmine lets out a choked, wet gasp. She takes a horrified step away from Clarice, staring at her husband's back, as if he has suddenly grown horns. You did not build a tech company, Preston, I state, my voice ringing with finality. You built a Ponzi scheme. You stole my money to buy your wife's affection and secure your seat of honor at my parents' dinner table. Listen to me, Keisha, please, Preston begs. The arrogance is entirely gone, replaced by a pathetic, whining desperation. He leans over the table, his hands flat on the documents. We can work this out. I can pay it back. I was going to secure a new funding round next month. Just keep this quiet. Do not ruin my career. I will sign whatever you want. Your career ended at 3:00 p.m., I reply, my expression turned to stone. Because I did not just freeze your accounts. I sent the entire unredacted forensic report along with every single one of your forged vendor invoices directly to the Securities and Exchange Commission. You are not just facing bankruptcy, Preston. You are facing massive federal charges for wire fraud and corporate embezzlement, right on cue, as if orchestrated by the universe itself. The dead silence in the room is shattered by a harsh, violent vibration. Preston's phone starts buzzing frantically in his suit jacket pocket. The sound is loud, aggressive, and entirely unrelenting. He pulls the device out with shaking hands. The screen illuminates his terrified face. Red emergency alerts flash rapidly across the display. It is his chief financial officer, followed immediately by his lead corporate counsel, and then a barrage of automated high-priority alerts from his banking institutions. His board of directors is actively panicking. The SEC has likely already raided his downtown office. Preston stares at the flashing screen. The last remnants of color drain from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. His knees buckle beneath him. He stumbles backward, blindly reaching for the edge of a tufted leather chair near the parlor entrance, and collapses into it. He drops his phone. The device clatters against the marble floor, still vibrating, still flashing the undeniable evidence of his total ruin. He puts his head between his knees, hyperventilating, his hands pulling at his own hair. Jasmine stares at the vibrating phone on the floor, then at her broken husband, and finally at the red dossier on the table. The reality of her situation violently registers. The luxury cars, the exotic trips, the elite status she lorded over me for years. It was all a mirage funded by stolen money, and it is all gone. She is married to a federal criminal facing years in prison. She clutches the sides of her head and lets out a piercing, hysterical scream that echoes endlessly off the 30-foot ceiling, a sound of pure, unadulterated devastation. Jasmine's high-pitched scream bounces off the marble walls and fades into a ragged, breathless gasp. She stares at Preston, who remains completely unresponsive in the leather chair, entirely consumed by the realization that his freedom has evaporated. Finding absolutely no comfort or protection in her ruined husband, Jasmine whips her head toward me. Her perfectly curated, affluent facade crumbles into dust. Her face flushes a blotchy, uneven red. The counterfeit designer bag slips from her shoulder and hits the floor with a dull thud. She points a manicured, trembling finger directly at my face, her voice vibrating with absolute, unfiltered rage. "You monster," she snarls, taking a heavy step toward the mahogany table. "You ruined my husband. You set us up. You are just jealous of me, Keisha. You have always been jealous of me, because I have a real family and a real life." I do not raise my voice. I do not match her hysterical, frantic energy. I simply look at her. I look at the woman who spent 30 years making sure I received the smallest slice of cake, the hand-me-down clothes, and the constant suffocating weight of our parents' immense disappointment. For my entire life, Jasmine's supposed perfection was the primary weapon Vernon and Clarice used to beat me down. I let out a soft, brief laugh. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated pity that echoes coldly through the grand foyer. Jealous. I repeat the word slowly, letting it hang in the chilled air of the dining room. I pick up the final red leather-bound dossier from the table, feeling the weight of its pages. Jealous of what exactly, Jasmine? Are you under the delusional impression that I am envious of a woman who has to steal from her own elderly parents just to afford a fake Birkin bag and a leased Mercedes? The air leaves Jasmine's lungs in a sharp, audible hiss. Her pointing arm drops limply to her side. I open the dossier and turn directly to page 5, sliding it across the polished wood until it stops right in front of Vernon. Page 5, I announce, my voice ringing with total unyielding authority. Take a very good look at those banking details, Vernon. It is a complete, irrefutable forensic record of your personal retirement accounts for the past 3 years. You and Clarice spent the last month harassing me, demanding my signature, and telling me I was a selfish, ungrateful daughter because I would not co-sign a massive loan to bail you out of foreclosure. You told everyone at church that my negative energy and my financial failures were dragging this family down. But I am not the reason you are losing your house. I point directly at my sister, my gaze locking her in place. Jasmine is the reason you are bankrupt. Look at the wire transfers. When you gave her access to your accounts to help manage your investments, she did not put your life savings into a high-yield trust. She did not secure your retirement. She drained every single liquid asset you possessed to fund her pathetic fake lifestyle. That $50,000 deposit you thought went into Preston's startup. It went directly to a luxury travel agency to pay for their anniversary trip to the Maldives. That emergency withdrawal you made last year for home repairs, Jasmine routed it straight to her personal credit cards to pay off her boutique shopping sprees. Vernon's hands are shaking so violently, he can barely hold the thick, glossy pages of the dossier. He stares at the routing numbers, his eyes tracking the undeniable systematic flow of his life savings directly into Jasmine's checking accounts. The undeniable black and white proof is printed in stark contrast to the golden pedestal he built for her. The illusion of his highly successful, brilliant eldest daughter shatters into a million irreparable pieces. He looks up, his face a portrait of absolute devastation. Jasmine! Vernon breathes out, his voice cracking, completely stripped of its usual booming, patriarchal authority. You told me the market was down. You told me the broker said we needed to wait for a correction. Jasmine stammers, physically backing away from the table, as if the documents might catch fire. The golden child is finally cornered, stripped of all her shields. Daddy, no, it is a mistake. Keisha fabricated those documents to make me look bad. She is a liar. Preston was going to pay it back with the next funding round. I swear we just needed a bridge loan to keep up appearances for the investors. She throws Preston directly under the bus, desperately trying to deflect the blame onto the man currently hyperventilating into his knees beside her. But it is entirely useless. The numbers do not lie, and the timeline of her theft is perfectly documented. She did not borrow money, she bled them dry so she could pretend to be wealthy. Clarice steps forward, moving like a sleepwalker. Her hands hover over the documents on the table. She traces the lines of the bank statements, her perfectly manicured nails trembling against the heavy paper. The realization hits her with the force of a physical blow. The daughter she paraded around as the ultimate success story, the child she used as a benchmark to make me feel entirely worthless, is a parasite who has literally eaten their future. Clarice looks at Jasmine, her eyes wide with a horrifying mixture of profound betrayal and deep revulsion. All the years of protecting Jasmine, of enabling her vanity, of punishing me for simply existing, have culminated in this exact moment of total financial ruin. The crushing reality of their situation fully descends upon my mother. The sprawling suburban house is in foreclosure. Their retirement funds are completely gone. Her golden child is a thief facing federal scrutiny alongside a ruined husband. And the scapegoat, the daughter she publicly humiliated just 5 days ago, is standing in a $12 million mansion wearing a fortune in diamonds, holding the power of life and death over their future. Clara slowly turns her head away from Jasmine. She looks at me. The haughty, arrogant matriarch who demanded my total submission is completely gone, erased from existence. Her shoulders collapse inward. Tears stream freely down her face, ruining her perfect, expensive makeup. She takes a desperate, stumbling step toward me, reaching out across the mahogany table with shaking, pleading hands. Keisha, she sobs, her voice thick with pure, unadulterated desperation, entirely abandoning her pride. Please, the $150,000. The bank takes the house on Monday morning. We are losing our home. Clarice's desperate, weeping pleas echo through the grand dining room, bouncing off the imported marble and dying in the cold air. Her hands remain outstretched toward me, trembling with the weight of her impending homelessness. She is waiting for the daughter she spent 30 years tearing down to suddenly revert to her old programming. She expects me to break. She expects me to rush forward, wrap my arms around her, and promise that I will fix everything. She expects the ingrained desperate need for her maternal approval to override my own self-respect. I do not move a single muscle. I stand at the head of the mahogany table and stare down at the woman who gave birth to me. I look at Clarice and then I shift my gaze to Vernon, the man who stood by and actively orchestrated my lifelong subjugation. I look at the parents who let my son die alone. The memory rises to the surface of my mind, not with the agonizing burning pain it used to carry, but with a frigid absolute clarity. I remember the sterile smell of the intensive care unit. I remember the rhythmic, terrifying beep of the heart monitor failing. I remember calling them begging them to come to the hospital because the doctors said Jamal only had hours left. And I remember Vernon telling me that they were seated at the head table of the annual church gala, that it would look bad if they left abruptly, that people would ask questions, and that I needed to stop being so dramatic. They prioritized a plated chicken dinner and their pristine social image over their dying grandson. They left me to sit in that dark room and watch the light fade from Jamal's eyes completely by myself. You already lost it, I say. My voice is quiet, but it rings out with absolute devastating finality. Clarice chokes on a sob, her hands dropping to the table. She stares at me, uncomprehending. Vernon's jaw goes slack. I said you already lost it. I repeat my words sharp and methodical. The bank foreclosed on your property on Tuesday morning. There is no $150,000 grace period anymore. There is no extension. The auction happened on Wednesday afternoon behind closed doors. I reach into the inner pocket of my Alexander McQueen jacket. I pull out a single neatly folded document. I drop the heavy notarized deed onto the center of the mahogany table. It lands with a soft slap that seems to suck the remaining oxygen right out of the room. I bought your house at auction. I state, looking Vernon dead in the eye. I purchased it through a blind corporate proxy. Legally, you do not own a single brick of that estate. You are trespassing on my property right now, and I am having you formally evicted on Monday morning. The color completely drains from Vernon's face. The proud, booming patriarch is reduced to a hollow, trembling shell. He stares at the deed as if it is a venomous snake. His entire identity is tied to that sprawling suburban mansion. It is his fortress, his ultimate proof to the world that he is a wealthy, powerful man. Knowing that I own it, that I hold the deed to the roof over his head, physically breaks him. His shock rapidly morphs into a frantic, chaotic denial. He begins shaking his hands, gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turn bone white. How? Vernon demands, his voice a harsh, breathy rasp. He looks at me with wild, terrified eyes. How did you do this? How did you afford a $12 million compound? How did you buy out Preston's company? How did you buy my house? You are a writer, Keisha. You write cheap little articles on the internet. You have no capital. You have no equity. Where did you get this kind of money? He is practically screaming now, completely unable to reconcile the broke, submissive daughter he bullied with the woman standing before him, dismantling his entire world. I do not answer him immediately. I reach down beneath the table one last time. I pull out a thick hardcover book. The glossy dust jacket catches the light from the chandeliers. I toss the book onto the table so it lands directly on top of the deed to his house. Vernon stares down at the cover. Clarice stops crying, her eyes widening in sudden, profound confusion. They both recognize the cover instantly. Everyone in their social circle recognizes it. You know that book, do you not, Vernon? I ask, my tone dangerously smooth. It is currently sitting at the #1 spot on the New York Times bestseller list for the 40th consecutive week. Clarice, you hosted a watch party at your house just last month for the season finale of the television adaptation on HBO. You bragged to all your church friends about how brilliant the writing was. You told the entire congregation that the anonymous author was a genius for capturing the toxic, manipulative dynamics of a wealthy family, hiding their dark secrets behind religion and status. Vernon's eyes dart from the book to my face, a sickening dread washing over his features. Open the cover, I command. Vernon reaches out with a trembling hand. He flips the heavy hardcover open to the title page. Right below the famous mysterious pseudonym that the entire literary world has been trying to unmask for the past 2 years, there is a fresh signature in bold black ink. It is my real name. The realization hits them with the force of a freight train. The blockbuster television show they have been obsessively watching, the brilliant novel they have been recommending to their elite friends. The story about a greedy, narcissistic patriarch and his complicit shallow family. It is not a work of fiction. It is a highly detailed, barely disguised biography of them. And it has made me tens of millions of dollars. Clarice covers her mouth with both hands, a muffled shriek escaping her throat as the sheer humiliating reality of what I have done washes over her. They have been publicly celebrating their own exposure. You called me a poor writer, I say, stepping back from the table, my posture rigid and towering. You told everyone I was a failure. You let Jamal die because you were busy protecting your precious image at a country club banquet. You sacrificed my son on the altar of your reputation. I sweep my gaze across the entire room, taking in the absolute wreckage of my abusers. Trevon is still weeping on the floor. Preston is catatonic in the leather chair. Jasmine is sobbing hysterically. And my parents are staring at the physical proof of their ruin. Well, I say, my voice cold, lethal, and carrying absolute finality. Look at your image now. I raise my right hand and snap my fingers. The sound cracks through the room like a whip. Instantly, Marcus and the 3 other heavily armed security guards step forward from the shadows, their heavy tactical boots thudding against the marble floor. They move with swift, terrifying precision, surrounding my family in a tight, inescapable circle. Escort them off my property. I instruct Marcus, never breaking eye contact with Vernon. If they resist, call the police and have them arrested for trespassing. I do not wait for their response. I do not listen to Clarice's renewed frantic begging or Trevon's pathetic apologies. I turn my back on all of them. I walk toward the sweeping marble staircase. The sharp, rhythmic crack of my red-soled heels echoes through the grand foyer, a steady, powerful metronome marking the first moments of my absolute freedom. I walk up the stairs and I do not look back. From the expansive landing of the second floor, I stand in the shadows and watch through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Marcus and his team march my former family out the front doors. They do not go quietly. Vernon is shouting empty threats into the cool night air, his face purple with exhausted rage. Clarice is weeping loudly, clinging to her husband's arm, as if her legs can no longer support her weight. Jasmine and Preston stagger behind them, looking completely shell-shocked, their entire fabricated universe having just imploded in spectacular fashion. Trevon is the last one dragged out. He is practically carried by 2 security guards, his feet dragging across the expensive driveway pavers, a completely broken man. The heavy iron gates of my estate swing shut behind them, locking them out in the darkness. I turn away from the window, feeling a profound, absolute silence settle over my house. It is the sound of total liberation. The fallout over the next several weeks is swift, merciless, and deeply satisfying. It plays out exactly as I engineered it, a fast-paced sequence of unavoidable consequences catching up to people who believed they were untouchable. Trevon's destruction arrives first, wearing dark blue windbreakers with yellow letters printed across the back. The IRS raid on his fake consulting firm happens before he can even attempt to shred his hard drives. Federal agents carry out dozens of cardboard boxes filled with the exact financial evidence I handed them. His indictment for federal tax evasion and wire fraud makes the evening news. By the time our emergency family court hearing takes place, Trevon is wearing an orange jumpsuit, appearing via video link from a federal holding facility because a judge deemed him a massive flight risk. The family court judge takes exactly 5 minutes to review his federal indictment, the offshore accounts he used to hide his wealth and his history of lying under oath about his income. The ruling is immediate and absolute. Trevon loses all legal and physical rights to Malik and Surry. He is stripped of every parental privilege he tried to use as a weapon against me. As the judge slams the gavel down, granting me sole permanent custody, Trevon buries his face in his handcuffed hands. He will spend the next 10 to 15 years in a federal penitentiary, completely erased from my children's lives. Preston and Jasmine experience a different but equally devastating kind of ruin. The Securities and Exchange Commission descends upon Apex Innovations with lethal efficiency. Preston's board of directors, terrified of federal implication, immediately oust him as CEO and cooperate fully with the authorities. All of his assets down to his personal checking accounts are frozen and seized to pay back the investors he defrauded. The luxury cars are repossessed in the middle of the night. The designer bags and jewelry Jasmine flaunted at family gatherings are auctioned off by court order to cover Preston's mounting legal restitution. With Preston facing his own lengthy prison sentence and drowning in millions of dollars of debt, Jasmine is forced into a reality she considers worse than death. She has to get a job. The woman who mocked my career and spent her days lounging at high-end day spas now clocks in for 39 hours a week at a fast fashion retail store in a dying suburban mall. She wears a polyester uniform and a plastic name tag. She spends her days standing on aching feet, organizing clearance, bins folding cheap sweaters, and being screamed at by entitled teenagers, complaining about return policies. She has to duck behind clothing racks when women from her former country club walk past the storefront, her face burning with the ultimate shame of her new reality. Every minimum wage paycheck she earns is immediately garnished to pay off the massive financial hole her husband dug for them. She is trapped in a cycle of endless humiliating labor, completely stripped of her glamorous facade. But the most poetic justice is reserved for Vernon and Clarice. Monday morning arrives with a harsh, unforgiving sun. The county sheriffs pull up to the sprawling suburban estate my father built his entire ego upon. The eviction is formal, public, and entirely legal. They are forced to pack whatever clothes and basic necessities they can fit into the trunk of their aging sedan, leaving behind the heavy mahogany furniture and the crystal chandeliers they can no longer claim to own. They move into a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town, the exact kind of neighborhood Vernon used to lock his car doors when driving through. The loss of their physical home is only the beginning of their punishment. The news of their bankruptcy, the foreclosure, the eviction, and their deep involvement in Jasmine's financial crimes inevitably leaks. It spreads through their elite social circles like a vicious wildfire. It saturates the gossip networks of their massive, wealthy megachurch. When Vernon and Clarice attempt to attend Sunday service clinging desperately to the last shred of normalcy, they find their reality permanently altered. The usher does not guide them to their usual seats of honor in the front row. Vernon is quietly informed that he has been removed from the deacon board pending a review of his moral and financial standing. Clarice's high society friends suddenly look the other way when she walks down the aisle, refusing to make eye contact. The silence when they try to join a post-service coffee hour conversation is deafening. Their phones, once ringing constantly with invitations to galas and dinner parties, sit entirely silent. The pastor preaches a scathing sermon on the sins of pride, greed, and deception, his eyes resting heavily on my parents the entire time. They sit in the back pew, isolated, disgraced, and completely shunned by the community they worshipped. They lose the only thing they ever truly cared about, their precious, immaculate status. They are nobody. The scene shifts, the cold, harsh reality of their ruin, fading away into the bright, beautiful warmth of a sun-drenched afternoon. I am standing on the sprawling stone patio of my backyard. The air smells of blooming jasmine and fresh-cut grass. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the ancient oak trees lining the perimeter of my estate, casting dancing shadows across the immaculate lawn. A few yards away, the surface of my massive custom-built swimming pool sparkles like crushed diamonds under the bright blue sky. Malik and Surry are laughing, the sound ringing out clear and joyous. Malik does a cannonball off the diving board, sending a massive wave of water crashing over his sister, who shrieks in delight and splashes him right back. They are vibrant, energetic, and completely unburdened. They are safe. They are wildly happy. They are deeply, unconditionally loved. I watch them play, holding a glass of iced lemon water in my hand. A genuine, relaxed smile spreads across my face, relaxing muscles that I did not even realize I had been clenching for the past 30 years. I feel an overwhelming, profound sense of peace. I look at the beautiful life I have built, and I realize a fundamental truth. I did not seek revenge out of malice. I did not destroy my family because I am a cruel person. I simply stopped protecting toxic people from the natural consequences of their own terrible actions. I stopped being their shock absorber. I stepped out of the way and let the heavy structures they built entirely out of lies crush them under their own weight. I used my pain, my endless nights of writing my tears, and my ultimate success to build an impenetrable fortress for the family that truly matters. I built this empire to protect my children, to give them a life where they will never know the feeling of conditional love or the sting of being deemed a failure by the people who are supposed to champion them. I built this for the memory of Jamal. Just last week, standing alongside the mayor and the hospital board of directors, I held a silver shovel and broke ground on a massive new construction project at the local pediatric hospital. The Jamal Legacy Wing will be a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to advanced pediatric care, fully funded by a permanent trust I established. My son's name will live on etched in stone, representing hope and healing for thousands of families facing the unimaginable darkness I once faced alone. I turned my deepest grief into a beacon of light. Family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to change the locks and let the toxic ones stay outside in the storm they created. Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect your peace and your children? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of surviving, thriving, and reclaiming your power. Remember, your lowest moment might just be the foundation of your greatest empire.